I'm going to call this work session to order. I am Eric Greenberg, Chair of the CA Board of Directors. Please remember that this work session of the CA Board of Directors is being live streamed. You can find tonight's agenda and background materials on the CA Board webpage. Links to these documents can also be found in the description section of our YouTube live stream for those who are watching the meeting there. If you are virtual, please mute your microphones unless speaking. If you're in the room, please ensure that your cell phones are silenced. Raise your hand to speak, and I'll record the names in the order which I see them. As we move through the work session, I will introduce each item on the agenda. If at any point you have trouble hearing me or any other board member, please say so. Tonight's timekeeper is Alan Klein. I'll now call the roll. Dick. Here. Lynn.
Here.
Brian.
Here.
Josh.
Present.
Alan.
Here.
Kevin. Yeah, Keith.
Here.
Bill.
Here.
Andy.
Present.
Ginny.
Here.
Dennis.
Here.
And I am here. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Can I get a second? Get a motion by Ginny, a second by Dick to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Any dissent? There being no dissent, the agenda is approved by unanimous consent. We'll now move on to resident speak out. I will call on you one by one in the order in which you are signed up. Individuals have 3 minutes for comment. Anyone representing an organization has 5 minutes. Following remarks, the board will have a chance to ask questions. Please mute your microphones when you're not speaking. Our first speaker today is Dara Baker. Dara?
Hi, everyone. Sorry I couldn't be with you tonight in person. I just want to start out by saying I understand that we are coming toward the end of this board's term, and I wanted to highlight a number of things related to what Protect Our Streams has been emphasizing for the last year and change, but also some of the relationship issues between staff and me as a resident, and some of what I've seen before the board. Really, what I'm highlighting is all of the things that have been requested from CA staff that, as far as I know, have not happened. There was a request from the chair to get information on the easement that was granted and on CA's power related to easements. As far as I know, that has not been provided. There have been numerous requests by myself as a resident and also from others who are sitting on the board from the CA staff to find out who answered the questions from the Maryland Department of Environment letter, all 5 sections that specifically requested answers from Columbia Association. I personally find it very disturbing that that information hasn't been provided, or if it has been provided, hasn't been highlighted as completed, since the ability of WSSI to complete the project, unless they have completely changed the way that they were going to do it, actually required information from CA because CA was proposed as a long-term steward. There have also been numerous times where CA staff have said that they were going to do something but did not follow up. Very early in the process, John McCoy said that he was going to do site visits and provide additional information. That did not happen. We were told that there would be public information sessions and more and additional information provided. Those really didn't happen. Really, the last opportunity for us to learn anything from the vendor came from a presentation to the board. And really, no emphasis or impact for the hundreds of residents Columbia residents who have signed the petition against the project, or the residents that I know have written in separately and made their feelings available. So as you think about the way that we go forward with this and other projects, and think about how the staff respond to these really significant and urgent needs. And then my other request as we go forward is that the board really revisit the CA approval process for any easement over 1 acre. The way in which this easement was approved is incredibly troubling, and the fact that it seems that it was proposed as if it was any other easement for a parking lot or a tot lot rather than a massive 6-mile stretch of land. Thank you very much for listening to my comments this evening.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
I have
Alan.
one. Dara, have you requested a site visit that has been refused to you?
We actually, at the very beginning of the process, when we did a walkthrough with John McCoy and a number of the other staff members, along with a representative from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, we're told that we could, they would do any kind of visit. That the vendor would take us to a site that they had available in Virginia. None of those things actually ever happened or were ever followed up on.
By them or by you, correct?
Well, we made the request. I don't feel like it was my responsibility to keep bugging them to do it when they said that they were going to, but no, nobody followed up with me or offered anything else. I wasn't offered something that I turned down.
Great, thank you.
Keith?
Yeah, I'm just doing a lot of research to get up to speed on some of these pieces at this point. Do you mind sending the list of things that you requested that weren't provided, just so that we can have that and track that down?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Joan Lankos.
Over the past year, this board has heard a lot regarding stream restoration. The passionate testimony has been provided through the singular lens that stream restoration is never the answer. Just last week, I attended state legislative hearing on House Bill 942, where certified experts as well as passionate observers continued that singular approach. Also weighing in were ecologists, geologists, arborists, water resource engineers, wetland specialists from environmental nonprofits, as well as federal, state, and local governments who have a differing opinion. They noted there is a place for stream restoration, and all restoration is not the same. I'm not an expert, but I've seen with my own eyes that after an ugly process in Longfellow, the stream is healthier than it was before the restoration. On the morning after a heavy rain, the stream runs slowly and the water is clear. There are lessons to be learned about the process and procedure done in that case. Although there are differing opinions about this restoration, the CA Board should use science-based methodology and find ways to ensure stream health. Every property is unique, every situation is different, varying strategies should be considered towards arriving at the long-term health of all Columbia's waterways. If you are looking at stream health, here are some things to consider. What is the best solution for a particular area? What would that look like? What are the future costs of doing nothing? What are the downstream impacts? Is it really so bad to remove a few trees upstream to prevent exposed infrastructure and the loss of pathways and even entire backyards downstream? Have the villages and downstream residents weighed in? Have we consulted neutral experts such as the Chesapeake Bay Program on best practices for stream management? After 50 years, restoration may be the only option. You have a resolution in front of you tonight. It includes taking advice from staff and professionals with subject matter expertise. This board should make decisions based on a broad representation of strategies. The community should understand the process involved and what their expectations should be. What does board oversight mean? Do you want to have a larger understanding of the project and whether it meets restoration and financial goals, or do you want to substitute your opinion for professional expertise? CA's goals should be communication, lessons learned, what do you want to see, and what are the parameters to get the desired results. Please focus on agreement and not passion. On another matter, the easement requested by Enterprise Community Homes for a land swap adjacent to Waverly Winds is a no-brainer. Flipping ownership of two corners of the property fixes the encroachment of a section of CA pathway on Enterprise property while allowing Enterprise to complete a sewer upgrade. The proposed private boardwalk easement near Lakefront North, which will connect over 900 new town center residences to the CA pathway system, is a good idea for access and walkability in the downtown area. Approving this easement at the same time as a needed public sewer easement allows for both projects to move forward together, which will limit disturbance in the area. I urge the CA Board to approve both these easements due to their benefit to the Columbia community.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Sharon Boyes representing Protect Our Streams. Sharon?
Sharon, you're on mute.
You're on mute. Sharon, you're on mute.
Sharon, there
Can you hear?
go.
Sorry,
we can
there
hear
we go. I'm sorry. Good evening, board members. Thank you for the continued opportunity to speak in opposition to the proposed Lake Elkhorn Stream project. Milton Matthews signed the contract, Brady Greer signed the easement, and Lakey Boyd, who signed an amendment, are all gone. And we wonder who will still be here when the bulldozers show up in violation of CA's own open space and watershed management plan to take the heat. Respected board members, you have the authority to take immediate control and oversight of this project right now, tonight. Dennis is not your boss. Independent legal counsel must review all the documents and provide you with a clear understanding of your options and the time limits for exercising them. You must see the new plans upon receipt and act on granting easements. The board first discussed Elkhorn for 11 minutes. From now on, please ask about the specific plans, degradation to the environment and the surrounding area, the stormwater runoff, the value of the easement, who will gain and who will lose, how many acres of open space are in easements now, who profits from them, and what was lost. The proposed Elkhorn project shows the need for immediate reform. On the results of stream restorations, I'll be quoting scientists this evening. Christopher, urban stormwater runoff delivered through conventional drainage systems is a complex environmental flow problem that can in large part be solved by harvesting stormwater runoff before it reaches aquatic ecosystems. Bob Hildebrand, the only monitoring most rebuilt streams receive are visual checks to see that the stream beds haven't eroded away. Few studies are studied closely to measure how much pollution is flowing from the streams into rivers and eventually the bay. We sampled 40 urban stream restorations. Despite the promise and allure of repairing damaged streams, there is little evidence for ecological uplift after a stream's geomorphic attributes have been repaired. The number and type of aquatic insects, indicators of stream health, didn't improve. His team notes, even when contractors replace the cleared vegetation along the banks, it's going to take decades for those trees to become reestablished. With their root networks, trees help prevent stream bank erosion. They soak up rainfall, helping to keep nutrients and sediments from washing off into a stream during a storm. In dry weather, they shade the water from the sun, keeping the temperature down to help sustain fish and amphibians. Our results suggest that restoration activities do not mitigate the reasons causing the ecological declines. Justifying degrading activities by claiming that restoration will solve the problems the activities caused is untrue and will lead to misdirected human and financial resources. Cashal, groundwater sampling. Studies of 5 streams showed that sites where trees were removed and had higher repairing groundwater nutrient concentrations, than sites where no trees were removed. Smucker. A recent study has shown that watershed scale out-of-channel management practices to restore urban streams can be quite successful. We found that the highest success rates biologically were for those projects that involved a primary focus on enhancing the riparian zone as the restoration action. Typically, these involve either planting native vegetation or removing non-native vegetation. In a meta-analysis of stream restoration projects from 1975 to 2008, Palmer found that only 2 of 78 restoration projects generated increases in macroinvertebrate diversity. Bill Stack, Center for Watershed Protection. I helped lead the effort in developing the recommendations of the expert panel to define removal rates for individual stream restoration projects. I can no longer hide from the turmoil that I helped to create in the stream restoration industry. This action unleashed an unprecedented flurry of projects identified in watershed and MS4 implementation plans across the Bay watershed, which are now being implemented by a thriving billion-dollar stream restoration industry comprised of engineers, hydrogeomorphologists, and a few biologists. I forgot to mention big-time financiers. Also take note of what I said about few biologists. The expert panel noted the root causes of stream bank erosion: impervious cover. As a result, municipalities are spending enormous amounts of money on projects that generate the necessary water quality credit but have no real impact on stream function. Perhaps change will come after we spend billions of dollars on these projects and the taxpayers ask, why can't I catch fish in this stream? Why would Columbia want any part of this? It would be wrong to leave this hanging for the next board. Please use your authority and take control of this tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Ellen.
Yeah. Sharon, it's been a while since the Longfellow, it is not, I'm sure it's still settling in since the Longfellow restoration. What's your observation of the clarity of the stream there?
The stream is atrocious. There's been several times in the past 2 months where I've really just considered calling MDE out. We've had another iron flocculate bloom that has settled on the bottom of the stream. There was blue-green algae in it right near the bridge where people like to let their dogs play or used to let their dogs play. The water is cloudy, it's shallow, it's warm, it's murky. I have no idea how somebody could see that if they saw it before when it was a crystal clean stream fed by the spring in Cedar Lane Park. And if you go above the restoration, you can actually still see what the water quality of the stream was.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you for your testimony. Next we have Sky.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Sky Anderson.
Good evening. I'm
Good evening.
Sky Anderson from Clary's Forest, and I have 4 short items tonight. Number 1, a rose by any other name. A name is something we all have, both a given name and a family name, a surname. I hate my first name because people never hear it correctly, and then I have to repeat it, which is embarrassing, and then they misspell it, and then I have to correct them, and even my mother said my name wrong, so I changed it. I changed it to Sky. People still don't hear it correctly or spell it correctly, but I'm no longer embarrassed because it's not my real name, so I don't take it personally. Only my family and the Army use my real name. This suggestion is for anyone who has ever had to announce names or will in the future. When you mispronounce someone's name, it should be embarrassing for you. We are used to people getting our names wrong, so mispronouncing our name is something we just simply brush off, but it reflects negatively on you. The least you can do is take a minute beforehand and practice, or ask someone how to say it. Or use the person's first name, if it's the last one that's the hard one. Names like Celinda, Damu, Golibersuch, Jansen Evelyn, Mariah, Jessamine, and even Sky. Number 2, SMEs, or subject matter experts. I looked up expert in LinkedIn, and I just love the definition. Somebody with a broad and deep understanding and competence in terms of knowledge, skill, and experience through practice and education in a particular field. Expertise is not gained by Googling on the internet, but by earning a degree, particularly an advanced degree, and working in the field for a few years, plus maybe teaching the subject. You have SMEs here at CA, many of them, and at least 6 or 7 are here in this room tonight. Use them. You will be well served. Number 3, we'd like to know how long the most recent CEO search took and how much it cost. We'd also like to know the projected cost for the current search, because it seems like it's being dragged out and got off to a late start. And finally, please do the right thing. Approve the recommendation of the audit committee. And while you're at it, define oversight as it pertains to the Lake Elkhorn Stream Restoration Resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I'd like to apologize to Keith for misstating his name during roll call. So I'm sorry. Any questions?
No, but if you call me Brian tonight.
I was just going.
Hey, Tom, we're not going to do that.
Can you just switch names? Thank you. Last, we have Richard Bannister. Richard?
Looks like Mrs.
Or Susan Bannister?
Yes, I'm on.
Okay. Susan Bannister.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
I'm going to try to condense into 3 minutes some comments from the Maryland Department of Environment and Army Corps of Engineers to the vendor Davie Resource Group expressing ongoing concerns about the Lake Elkhorn project regarding the lack of benefits and the negative impacts from that project. From the Maryland Department of the Environment, comments March 10th, 2022, quote, "It does not seem that CA has fully considered the desires of the community when proposing this stream restoration. Most of the site appears to have an intact riparian buffer. In fact, the project will result in the loss of this mature forest and the associated functions for a couple of decades. This forest is very important to the community as it provides a great connection with wildlife. It provides many important functions and values to the community and to the environment. The proposed riparian buffer will likely be lower functioning than the existing riparian buffer. Considering that the site is already heavily forested, it is unlikely you will get much, if any, uplift from the current condition. In fact, you will have a temporal loss in riparian function. Extensive upland tree loss and wetland impact is exacerbated by the fact that it's in a suburban residential setting. Reach 1 has high potential tree loss abutting backyards, also less potential uplift. Maryland Department of Environment requests that you remove this reach from the mitigation bank. The amount of proposed impact to resources is very high. MDE received many negative comments related to this project. We strongly recommend you begin discussions immediately with the other stakeholders." And from the Army Corps Engineer letter and comments of April 11th, 2022, quote, "The project will result in the loss of this mature forest and the associated functions. The loss of riparian tree cover within CA open space along the stream is problematic due to aesthetics and associated wildlife connections. Extensive tree clearing will reduce habitats for wildlife and the associated aesthetic value of the CA trail system buffer. The Corps continues to have major concerns about the potential impacts and associated limited restoration potential in the upper portion. The Corps strongly recommends that the sponsor not proceed with preparation of the draft instrument without removal of proposed work activities in Reach 1 upstream of Jackson Pond. These concerns are shared by the resource agencies, elected officials, nonprofit organizations, and local citizens. We strongly recommend you begin discussing immediately with the other stakeholders about potential modifications. There have been no discussions. This is now me, not the Army Corps and the Maryland Department. There has been no request for discussions, nor any meetings with the stakeholders, myself included, as my
Thank you. Can you make a final statement?
abuts this land.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Do we have any questions? Alan?
I just want to be clear. Towards the end, you said, "Now this is me." Was everything you said before that a quote from one of those two organizations?
Absolutely.
Okay,
All of
thank
the
you.
other words up to that point was quoted from the comments from the Army Corps and the Maryland Department of the Environment, obviously condensed into 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Yeah.
Jenny?
Would you be willing to send that testimony in so we could read it?
Yeah, I sure would. And I can also send the citations to the full parts that this is from.
Okay.
Which would be great if you would all
Yeah,
read
then
that
we can
because there's a lot in
differentiate.
there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any
Thank you.
further questions? Thank you for your testimony.
You're welcome.
That concludes resident speak out for tonight's work session. To limit interruptions during board discussion, all members of the general public will now be returned to the audience. This means you'll no longer be able to show your camera or unmute your audio, but you're more than welcome to stay on as an attendee to watch the remainder of the work session. You can also watch a live stream of the CA's work session on the CA Livestream YouTube page. Thank you so much for your participation tonight. I will now take a moment to allow staff to make this transition. Do you want to take 5 minutes?
Yeah, sounds
Okay.
good.
We'll recess until 7:30.
Okay.
Session. Our first topic tonight is the Lakefront North easement request for 10 minutes. Dennis?
Jessica?
Hello, everyone. Did I overhear that, Susan, you're going to be moving my slides forward?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for doing that. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you guys. Tonight, I'll be presenting very briefly 3 easements for your consideration and discussion. Each of the applicants is in attendance and will prepare or provide an additional presentation to you in more depth, but I want to provide an overview and staff's recommendations. Next slide, please. The first easement for your consideration is located in the Lakefront North area of downtown Columbia. Howard Hughes Corporation is requesting a private storm drain easement, a private boardwalk maintenance easement, and a 20-foot public sewer and utility easement. This is the second phase of easements approved for this project. You previously approved easements earlier this fall. Next slide, please. The phase 2 easement areas are highlighted in blue on the map on your left. On the right is showing the easement areas. The light blue map is for the public sewer and utility easement that will be given eventually to Howard County. The proposed boardwalk maintenance easement will be between Howard Hughes Corporation and CA. And then there is a private storm drain easement to codify existing conditions on a storm drain that is currently in the field and will be upgraded as part of this project. Next slide, please. Thank you. Highlighted for you is the site development plan. The gray area is the existing lake-to-lake asphalt trail. This is the one that runs up to Vantage Point. The light blue is the sewer line that would run down from the existing Howard Hughes site and across and tie into the existing sewer line that trail runs on top of. And then CA staff is recommending that the boardwalk be included in this project so that it and the sewer are both put in at the same time, which will limit the amount of disturbance in this area, and that we recommend the boardwalk be a condition of granting the approvals for the other easements. The yellow area, when we're talking about the boardwalk easement, that's really signifying the difference in maintenance obligations that we have negotiated for these infrastructure pieces. And then the storm drain is the existing storm drain that's going to have a greater riparian barrier put in. Next slide, please. The second easement that will be before you tonight is the Waverly Winds. Sorry, it's not actually an easement. It's a land swap. And I was going to emphasize that, but it's the land swap at the Waverly Winds site. Enterprise Community Homes is requesting an equal land swap with CA for about 0.05 acres. Can you go to the next slide? So you can see, if you're looking at the configuration of the property boundaries, there's a little triangle section, which is the shaded in red triangle that is currently owned by CA that sort of dips into their property line. And then the missing triangle piece that actually has a CA pathway on it is not on our property, it is on their property. So this is really about kind of reconfiguring the property boundaries to be more logical and to align with how we're actually using the property. Next slide, please. And one of the primary purposes of this, as well as they go through redevelopment, one of the best placements for their sewer line is actually across that parcel that we currently own. So rather than pursuing an easement, they approached us with a land swap agreement. Next slide, please. And our final easement for you tonight is the Wood Creek floodplain expansion. Howard County is expanding the 100-year floodplain to match the updated maps. So this is really about reflecting what's actually in the field and updating the documents for that. The impetus for this at this time is a access for a stream restoration project that is part of the Wood Creek Stream Restoration Project. Can you go to the next slide, please? Of note here, and it might be difficult to see on this slide, is the highlighted green section is actually the CAN property. So the majority of the Stream Restoration Project is not on our property. And in fact, I don't think most of the work is happening there. And you can go to the next slide. Can you go back, Susan? I'm sorry. it might be difficult to see, but there's a pathway, a bridge here that is for CA, and that will not be touched as part of the stream restoration project. Staff is recommending approval of all of these projects that are before you, subject to the conditions that are outlined in the packets. I can take any questions anyone has.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on any of the 3 easements? Ellen?
Did we request the land swap, or did they request the land swap?
They approached us, showing us what they were trying to do and what was happening with the property boundaries. We concurred with their conclusion that it was a good idea to do a land swap in that case.
Thanks.
Dick?
On the first piece, the lakefront north phase 2, where it looks like there's was there a pipe that's going to go through there? What exactly, underneath the boardwalk? What are we putting in, and what's in the green area? And what does it connect with?
Sorry, I'm not hearing you very well, Dick. The green area is a storm drain outfall, so that's where you have water, the stormwater outfalling, and then you have large boulders that kind of break up the flow of it. I'm not an engineer, but I believe Dan Sweeney might be able to answer those questions more specifically.
Well, the water it's a storm water that's going to come off of their parking lot and go into Arlington. I'm not sure what's happening there.
No, there is an existing storm drain there. So currently the water that flows from the Howard Hughes site goes to 2 existing storm drains. This is one of those existing outfalls. So as part of their project, they are consolidating their storm drains and they are beefing up this storm outfall.
So this will go into a sewer?
No, this will daylight. So it's an existing storm drain outfall and it will just have work done to it. It's hard to see on your screens, I believe, the creek that it's flowing into is highlighted. You can kind of see where the stream bank dashed line is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
well,
this is storm drain, not sewer.
Disappear.
So it is not piped, no.
What's happening here? Here's the stream.
No, stream bank buffer is the dotted lines here.
So there's in between the purple and the blue line, there's a arrow that says perennial stream. That is the stream area.
Okay, I'm having trouble seeing that.
I do think that our applicants probably have more detailed maps that are aerials, and that will probably provide a better view. This is the technical documents.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I see the boardwalk that goes over to our pathway.
Yes.
Okay, and that crosses our stream, doesn't it?
Yeah.
No?
Yes, there will be a bridge over the stream,
pedestrian.
and then there will be a boardwalk.
That's the stream.
Oh, okay.
Street.
Okay, I've got it. Okay.
So it's very fine text. I apologize. It's pedestrian bridge, and it's right next to the yellow highlighted area.
Okay.
Andy?
Yeah, let's see. I'll start with we're on Lakefront North. Who will be paying for the installation of the bridge and the boardwalk?
Howard Hughes will.
Okay. And then do we have to maintain it afterwards?
Yes, we'd be taking on the maintenance obligation
Okay, we will take
for
over
the
the
purple
maintenance.
section.
They will build it.
They will be taking on maintenance obligation for the ramp and the staircase that is on their property leading down to the bridge. And then for that section, the reason there's the easement needed, that section of the boardwalk before it hits the bridge abutment, which is the natural kind of maintenance stopping point.
Okay, that's good. And then is there already a public sewer easement in that area? Because I notice, I don't know, maybe it seems to come down, maybe it's a new one, but I noticed a little easement area.
There are several sewer easements coming off the Howard Hughes property, but they do not cross down into here. They go to the northern section.
Okay.
The existing lake-to-lake asphalt trail is on an existing sewer line in an easement area. So that might be what you're saying. It's tying into that.
Okay. The Waverly Woods, just a question on that. Waverly Winds, sorry. I noticed that right where, the sewer is proposed to go, there is a pathway. Is that a CA pathway, or is that Waverly Woods pathway? And I noticed it said that it was going to be relocated.
Yes, so you'll notice the on the southern section of the site, there's kind of a tan outline of the sidewalk. That's the trail, so that's where it's being reconfigured. This existing CA pathway sort of swivels across the property line several times. So it's basically going to be rebuilt as part of this project.
30 minutes because we're done at 3.
We've marked it out. The hashed blue area, that's the existing pathway that is on the Waverly Winds site.
And so it's being moved just south onto.
Part of it's being moved south, and then part of it's actually swooping in because we want to continue to maintain the community connections. So we want this community to be able to access the pathway system. So it's kind of swooping in and then connecting into their side infrastructure, and then continuing to move to the east to connect into the wider CA pathway network.
What were you going to say, Dennis?
She covered it.
Yeah, because I just want to make sure that. I know that go. If it was going to be our path, we had an easement. If it was going to be theirs, they were going to take care of it. I just wanted to make sure. I mean, no problem with the land swap. It was just that we're going to straighten it out. I'd like that to make sure we straighten all that out.
No, we're going to be straightening out the maintenance arrangements as part of this because it is an existing pathway that is in an easement, but it doesn't have the maintenance codified. So we're going to make sure we do that and actually codify what's existing.
Oh, and the last one is the floodplain. Outside of just simply designating it as floodplain, does the county expect to do anything with it, or?
Well, they will be using this as their access for the Wood Creek Stream Restoration Project.
Oh, all right.
For no permit.
Yeah.
So they're going to put their equipment through it. All right.
Yeah, they will be traversing it, yes.
Yeah, all right. And then I'll restore it to a floodplain, whatever.
Yeah, I would defer those comments for the applicant. They know the project site more. I know that they will not be impacting the CA bridge and trail as part of that.
All right. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you. Jenny?
Yeah. Jessica, on the Waverly Winds land swap,
Yes.
I don't guess you can see this. I see where we're transferring from CA, and this is where we're picking up. But what is that land? Is it worth picking up even? I mean, what is it?
It's got our pathway on it.
It's got.
Oh, yeah. So CA's staff assessment of this is essentially we are swapping land that we are not using that is currently just buffer area between their project site and Cedar Lane for usable open space land that we've actually already built an asset on.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm having trouble hearing you. So is that our path that's there?
It is our pathway and it is their land. So we are bringing our assets onto CA property with this.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Josh?
I have a question. Could you elaborate more on this private storm drain for the first one? Is there already a storm drain there, or are they adding a private storm drain?
Yeah, there is an existing storm drain outfall. So it is an existing one that's currently how stormwater moves through this area. And then they are increasing, I believe they're increasing the pipe size and adding more riprap to the area. Dan, the applicant, when they go, they can correct me if I got that wrong. But.
Well, that's what I'm trying to understand. What is it they're going to be doing?
So the whole site is redeveloped. Susan, can you actually go one more up? To get the full area. Thank you. So Howard HRD's Lakefront North project site is highlighted in black here.
Sure.
They're going to be redeveloping that.
Uh-huh.
There are currently 2 existing storm drains that collect water from this site and move towards CA property, and they outfall onto CA property right now. And so what we are doing, and as part of their proposed redevelopment, they're consolidating those into one because for their approved environmental concept plan basically has proved that's the stormwater that they'll be handling for the site. So they're going to be, I think, replacing that pipe and then adding more of the stone that receives the stormwater. And that stone is located on a property site because that you place that stone from the point where the pipe ends to where the stream is so you don't have the washout. So essentially the water will move over the stone to enter the stream.
Bill?
First, Dennis, please.
Oh,
then I'll
Dennis.
go. I was going to suggest we turn it over to Howard Hughes for more technical details, because they have a presentation and a PowerPoint.
Okay, no, that's fine. I want to know specifically. Yeah.
Are they presenting the PowerPoint today?
Yes.
Okay.
As part of this item or
Dan,
future
are
item?
you coming up?
My understanding of the agenda item, gentlemen, is that, ladies and gentlemen, there's 10 minutes each for the applicants following my presentation. I just wanted to make sure I provided you a staff presentation for all the items before you today.
Right there. One seat for each of you.
Thank you.
Well, if we have further questions for Jessica, should we wait till after this
I
or?
suggest we wait till after this.
Okay.
And then we have, Sam.
Sorry,
Who's not there?
we got technical support coming.
Here we go.
The other one. Those guys can do that.
Are there any other presentations?
Two more.
Oh, two more on.
Sure.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Lauren Royston, and I'm Associate Development Manager with Howard Hughes, and also a downtown Columbia resident. So in yellow is the Lakefront North site, which is situated between the mall to the left and the Vantage Point townhomes to the right. As shown, the Starrett parking lot is currently being underutilized and going to undergo a major redevelopment with multiple residential buildings, as well as new retail. It's a really important investment for Howard Hughes in downtown Columbia and totals hundreds of millions of dollars. It's also an amazing addition to the already premier Lakefront district. As you may remember, several months ago, we discussed the easements on the west side of the project, and tonight we're discussing the easements on the east side. We're here to request an easement to allow us to build a brand new boardwalk and other utilities that relate to the Lakefront North redevelopment. The boardwalk will create an amazing connection to the lake-to-lake trail for existing and future downtown Columbia residents.
I'm so sorry, it's not shared.
Oh.
There it is.
Thank you. That's okay. All right, so this map shows an overlay of the proposed development in the Lakefront District. This bold pink line to the right is the proposed new connection to the lake-to-lake trail that would increase walkability and connectivity for all the existing and new residents. The boardwalk that's kind of right at this arrowhead would allow much easier access for current residents at the Vantage Point townhomes and the surrounding neighborhoods to Lakefront North, the mall, and Whole Foods. We've been working with multiple environmental consultants and permitting agencies as part of the design of these new features. And to go over some of the additional details of the project, I'll turn it over to Dan Sweeney, GLW.
Good, thank you. And I'm probably going to repeat a lot of the same stuff Jessica did, but to zoom in.
Whoa.
So we have the three easements, which are this public sewer easement, which is we're going to be building a new sewer line, goes under the stream, and it will connect to the existing sewer that's under the lake-to-lake trail. This easement would go to Howard County. The sewer would be maintained by Howard County. The middle one is the boardwalk maintenance easement. So as Jessica said, the boardwalk starts in this side of the Howard Hughes site. There's almost 30 feet of vertical elevation that has to be made up to get down to the lake-to-lake trail. And we're doing that all in an ADA and even less slopes. And so what we're doing on the Howard Hughes side is there's a switchback that stays all on Howard Hughes land. And then there's some steps for a shortcut. And then once we get to the bridge, that's where HRD will build, how Columbia Association will maintain the bridge. And then the piece that connects to the lake-to-lake trail the small easement, it just allows Howard Hughes to maintain the piece up until we get to the boardwalk. And that will be an easement to Howard Hughes. And then the third one is the storm outfall easement. That's an easement between CA and Howard Hughes. And there's been an existing storm drain outfall there since probably the early 70s. And as part of this one, we will be upgrading that outfall to meet all current standards. The pipe and the concrete outfall structure will be on Howard Hughes land, but it's the replaced riprap, the stone, that really slows the velocity down, will be the piece that's on Columbia Association land. And that is in the exact same spot the stone is today. We're taking that stone, putting in a larger stone with a better handle the flows from both the pipe and the stream in both directions. Going to just a few details next. And so the boardwalk is going to be built on piles. It will be built by a company named Greenway, who has done a few of the boardwalks throughout Columbia. They did the one in the Meriwether district that connects Howard Hughes' office to one of the Meriwether parking lots. It's going to have a non-slip surface, and this is a detail of the bridge. The pathway is 10 feet wide, with a generous width for both pedestrians and bicyclists. And then these are just the individual and combined easements that Jessica showed you already. So, happy to answer any questions.
Any further questions?
I think we're just going all the way around the room here, huh? So, all right, a couple quick hits. Currently, the subject land is an asphalt parking lot, so all the rain that falls on there goes into one of a few storm drains, and this is one of them. Given the before and after, when, and you may not know this, maybe we know from Howard Hughes, will there be a reduction in flow volume after the construction is done, when these buildings are built? Will there be cisterns or anything else put in to as we've been talking all night long, to slow the flow? What can we look for a flow reduction? This is what we should be doing, right, Brian? Right?
Yeah, we should be sucking it up first.
Let him answer, please.
Please answer. I'm sorry.
We are, absolutely, as you know, there's an existing parking lot. It's all impervious. There were 2 buildings there which made it even more impervious a couple of years ago. And as part of the redevelopment, we will be installing stormwater management for the latest regulations. We'll be using features like porous pavement. We'll be using features like green roof. We'll be using other water quality devices that will help clean the water to help mimic as close as possible to the pre-development conditions, which was still a developed asphalt parking lot, but we're maintaining very close to what was the pre-development.
So is it a known value that we could figure out the reduced volume coming out of that outfall?
I don't have the numbers in front of me.
Okay. Could we get those at some point? Is that possible?
Yeah, we can let you know the before and after. I think we did there's probably something that tells us what the flow rates are. I don't know if we have a volume calculation.
Okay. Related, and I'll get out after this. The boardwalk that you intend to construct through the area, we've got the bridge over the stream, but during high volume rain events, what is our assurance that that path will remain after an event?
The boardwalk, the bridge itself is built, the bottom of the bridge is 2 feet above the floodplain elevation. So that's pretty high up in there. The pathway itself is just below the floodplain elevation. So at some point, the boardwalk has to come back in and down and match existing grade. We did raise, as part of this, we will be raising the existing pathway a couple feet to get the boardwalk even higher and to minimize how much is under the 100-year floodplain elevation. But for the majority of the boardwalks above, there is a small piece that dips under the 100-year elevation. But it will be constructed and built with those velocities in mind.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dick?
This clears up some of my questions from before. The sewer line is an existing sewer line, and they're going to, is this part of the construction? replacing two sewer lines with one, or what?
No, that's the storm. So there are 2 storm drain outlets here today that we were consolidating into one and upgrading to the latest
Now,
standards.
which one's going over all the riprap that you're putting?
That's the storm. That's this one.
Yeah,
right
that's
here.
the storm. And there's an existing sewer line that goes into the county sewer.
The existing county sewer runs under the trail that's out there today.
Okay, and so the pipes that we're looking at that were in blue, I think those are,
These are new pipes that will be built.
they're new pipes,
One
but they're
site.
still going to go into a county sewer line.
Correct, into a county sewer pipe.
Okay. Now, the water that's coming in over the, the larger stones and everything, is that going to be filtered for trash and things like that?
Yeah, there are several water quality devices on the site that will treat the water before it comes to its outfall. That's part of the upgrades to water management that we're installing.
Now, right now, you're absolutely right, that parking lot is just huge, and I'm sure it puts a lot of water in. It would be helpful if we knew how much that water is going to be, is going to decrease. And I'm sure with all the things that you're doing with that new site, it should be considerably less of a load. Are there other storm sewers right now that are diverting that water?
No, I mean, the runoff the runoff flow rate is going to remain roughly the same. The impervious area is going to be pretty close before and after. So
Now, you say that the bridge will be 2 feet above the flood line, or what?
your floodplain elevation.
Because we've lost some bridges at great expense.
Dick, could I get some other people in the queue?
Okay, I just want to make sure that that's,
Yeah, that's the standard for bridges, is to have the bottom of the bridge 2 feet above floodplain elevation.
okay,
Thank you. Alan?
Yeah, a couple of tiny questions and 2 larger, one which may be for CA staff, not you all. So the one easement goes to the county because the county's in charge of the sewer system, that's my understanding, okay. You say there's already riprap where the new riprap's going to go. Is there already an easement that covers that area?
No, that was something, back when that was built, Howard Hughes owned the open space lot too, the open space lot. And then when that was transferred to CA in the 80s or 90s, an easement was never created.
Got it.
As part of that land transfer. So it is cleaning up something that's been there since CA had owned the lot.
What's the rationale, and this may be for anybody who's part of this, it's nice that Howard Hughes is going to pay for this bridge, boardwalk, whatever we're calling it. If it's Howard Hughes's, why should we maintain it? Or why shouldn't Howard Hughes pay to maintain it? And do we have any, who owns this thing once it's built?
So if I could jump in, CA will own it, and CA generally takes maintenance responsibility for pathways that go onto CA property, and we maintain stuff at a much higher level than, not that Howard Hughes wouldn't do a good job, but we're going to maintain it at a very high level. And so, yeah, that was a requirement from staff. I'd also like to add one other thing is that we didn't discuss is that CA is requiring that the pathway, that boardwalk be lit in anticipation of additional lighting that might take place in that area. But that is another ask that Howard Hughes has agreed to that wasn't part.
Great. Thank you. And my larger question that may or may not be for right now is for all of these 3, besides this added maintenance, what are the potential? I hear that you're recommending, as staff recommending all 3 of these. There's often other things, there's a balance. There's enough good that you want to do, but what are the downsides? What are the upstream or downstream costs? What liabilities are we incurring by doing any of these 3? So, what's the... I hear the benefits.
So the benefit is that there's that connection that we're going to create to the lake pathway, which is huge.
Yeah.
The benefit is that Howard Hughes is going to put in a couple $100,000. That's not an expensive improvement that CA is not going to have to pay for. And the downside is that in the future, far in the future, that I hope, past my tenure, that there will be some maintenance costs. But as he said, the pathway is 2 feet above the floodplain, and that is not typically a lot of our not the pathway, the bridge
was 2 feet.
The bridge, and so a lot of our bridges are down in the floodplain, and they're not above the floodplain elevation. So the ones that have gotten washed away, it would take if that storm gets above that bridge, we have a much bigger
other
problem
problems.
than that bridge, is what I would say.
Any other downsides or costs from either of the other two things we're talking
Well,
about?
we're going to, there'll be some light bulbs to replace and
No,
stuff
I mean-
like that, but incidental.
Okay.
Brian?
Oh, yeah, I just want to clarify what Bill was saying. So in your answer to Bill, you said that you're going to return the land that you're building on to as close as possible to pre-Columbia development.
No,
So,
sorry, no, I meant the as of today conditions, not pre-Columbia.
so the type of, when you say you're upgrading to the new regulations, would that be the same as we could see in the Merriweather district? Is it the same, or is it an upgrade to that?
No, this is the same Howard County, Maryland Department of the Environment
Okay.
regulations that we're meeting here. And
So-
obviously, and this is being reviewed by Howard County, State of Maryland. State Highways reviewing it because of their stream easement, and so is, I think, the Army Corps of Engineers. They're all reviewing this as part of this project, and they'll all have to approve it before anything can be built.
I thought, so it's not pre-Columbia development? It's pre-what?
It's as today, before the development starts.
Oh, well, that's a pretty low standard in any case, isn't it? Okay.
That is the standard.
Thank you. Josh?
So, I mean, the bridge I'm totally on board with. What I don't understand is the sewer and the storm drain. Why do you need, if you're just replacing what's already there, why do we even need to do an easement for that part?
It's cleaning it up. It's defining the maintenance responsibilities. I mean, if Howard Hughes has something on CA property, it's best to be defined within an easement. So it's clear who owns it, who maintains it.
Okay.
It comes with a lot of confusion.
Understood. Okay.
Thank you. No further questions. Is there a presentation for the next
Enterprise.
Enterprise?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And without objection, can we add 15 minutes for the rest of the discussion on easements? Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Mackenzie Kissel, and I'm a Senior Real Estate Development Manager with Enterprise Community Development. I want to, I'm sorry. I'll kind of keep going while this presentation is loading. I want to say at the top here that while I am involved with the Waverly Winds redevelopment, the actual project manager from Enterprise is unfortunately out of the country today on a much undeserved vacation. So I do have with me here Mike Tran, who is with GLW and is our civil engineer, and hopefully between the two of us we can answer all of your technical questions. Excellent, thank you. Can I advance?
Yeah, just use the scroll mouse.
Great. Okay. So Jessica provided a good overview here of the land swap. I'm going to provide a little bit of additional color on the redevelopment of Waverly Winds.
So I think it's the scroll, we'll just scroll
the
down the
wheel.
white button
Thank
in the
you.
middle there. There you go.
Sorry.
No problem.
Excellent. So just as a quick reminder, Waverly Winds sits along Cedar Lane. It is directly adjacent to the Swansfield Pool just north of it. So the reason that we asked for the land swap is because bigger picture, we are redeveloping the property. And the reason that we are redeveloping the property is because the existing community of Waverly Winds is 62 townhouses and apartment flats that are at this point functionally obsolete for a myriad of reasons. And so our vision here is to demolish the community as it is today and to rebuild in two new multifamily buildings where we will be approximately doubling the density. Just a little bit more on the specifics of our redevelopment. So a total of 123 units across the two buildings. There will be 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units, and these will be available for a full swath of incomes from very low income to very high income, completely market rate and unrestricted. We are replacing all of the existing unit types and the affordable units in kind, and the reason for that is that we want all of our existing residents to be able to return to the property should they so choose. And then finally, one of the things that we get to do with this redevelopment is that we get to kind of right the wrongs of the existing community. What do I mean by that? Number one, the existing community is old and it is difficult to maintain, and the building systems are breaking down. And of course, the new community will be modern and beautiful. The existing community is also 100% inaccessible, and at the new community, we get to be accessible, we get to be 100% visitable, we get to have UFAS units for persons with disabilities on site. The existing community is energy inefficient. The new community will be Enterprise Green Communities certified. And lastly, the existing community, there are no amenities on site to speak of, and with the redevelopment, we get to build replete indoor and outdoor amenities. Okay, so to the actual land swap, this is essentially the same slide that you saw from Jessica, so there's not much that I need to repeat here. I'll just reiterate that on the east portion of the site, that is the land to be swapped to CA, and there is an existing CA pathway, so we think that makes a lot of sense. And then from our standpoint, the land on the western edge, which is to be swapped to ECD, Enterprise, will be swapped because we need to run a new sewer through that area. This is our technical site plan, which shows the sewer, and really I mostly wanted to have this slide just in case there are technical questions that we need to address. Finally, sort of back to the big picture, just timeline-wise, we are in the midst of our entitlements at the early stage. We do not anticipate that our site development plan will be submitted until July. And then the land swap itself, we are hoping to complete with the Columbia Association Board's blessing by December. That seems like it is a very long time away, but in fact, there is quite a bit to do. And again, sort of big picture, we are hoping to start construction on the project in summer, fall of 2024 with a 18-month construction period, which puts us all the way into 2026 before we anticipate opening. So in summary, our request will be to approve the land swap, and that will, of course, be subject to staff's technical review of all of the legal documentation and the plat that goes along with the land swap agreement.
Any questions? Alan?
You referred to something called Enterprise Green Community Certification or something like that, so that we don't think that that's just a self-congratulatory thing. How does that compare to other standards, LEED, Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval? I don't know.
Yes, it's very similar. I would not be able to tell you technically if Enterprise is like a LEED Silver or a LEED Gold. I don't know that specifically, but it's a very similar standard.
Is this something you all certify for yourselves, or do you have somebody from the outside come in and certify?
No, we are not allowed to certify for ourselves, most definitely. And there are, I realize that it sounds like Enterprise is doing it, but there is Enterprise Community Development, who I work for, and then there is Big Enterprise Community Partners. And obviously, we are a family, but in terms of the certification, they hold very strict standards, and many developers do go through it. It's not just an Enterprise thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have one question. So this is going to double the number of units for that complex?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
And if I understand it, basically the same number affordable and then an equal number market rate. Is that basically correct?
It is sort of a third, and a third of what we would call affordable under 50% AMI, what we would call workforce, and what we would call market rate. A little bit skewed towards market rate. It's more like 40% market rate. But
that refers to residents, not the units themselves. The units will be indistinguishable among those three categories. Is that correct?
That's correct. If anyone's heard of the Porter, we don't do that. You won't be able to tell the difference between any of our units.
It's that full spectrum. That's
Ginny?
Yeah, the former project, including the one in Wild Lake, was 100% low income, correct? Both of those. And the idea is that the new way of looking at things that's much better for the residents is to have mixed populations. So my congratulations.
And you're talking about the existing communities, is that
Yeah.
correct? Yes.
Because I know
agree with
Rouse
that.
at that time was trying to help people, but it really did not prove, in my opinion, to be the best way to do it. What you're doing now and changing is the way to go, I think. So in order to do that, you need increased density.
Thank you very much. We hope we have a better model, yes.
I get paid by you to do that.
Perfect.
Andy,
I'm
just
kidding, I'm
quick.
kidding.
So this is the third one, right? Rosalind Rise was the first, and then the one across from the hospital, the name totally eludes me,
Ranley Court,
is the second, and this would be the third.
that is
And you
correct.
still have 2 more to go.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And the
County's up next.
the last one's the county.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is so much more constructive.
Good evening. We're here, I'm here for Howard County this evening, looking to get approval for, it's an expansion to a floodplain, but a kind of a correction to encompass the floodplain that we've modeled and realized actually exists in the area. But this started as a project that was recommended from the community. They called us in. They've had issues in the community. Let me introduce myself first. Is it rolling? There we go. Okay, so the project team here, we had McCormick Taylor and Lindsay Nicole. She's not here tonight. I should be able to answer all the technical questions we have. My name's Brian Cleary, and I work with the Stormwater Management Division at Howard County. So this is just a quick overview location map of the project. It's located along the southeast side of Phelps Luck Road, south of its intersection with Maryland Route 103, and within the Wood Creek community. So the purpose of this project was initially just, we want to address the issues that were raised by the community. The community has been built very close to what we've identified as a floodplain and drainage easement that the county did at some point take over. So we had our law department look at it, and we do have the responsibility to go in there and maintain that channel. It does happen to convey more than 30 acres, which makes it a regulated floodplain. So our intention is to stabilize this stream in place. The community over the years has tried to do little fixes here and there to try to stabilize it and protect property. But we're going to come through and could do a more comprehensive address to all the erosion issues. And then as part of that process, we're taking a look at the existing floodplain that was established through there, because it really just took a 20-foot wide swath right through the property. We all know floodplains don't necessarily follow those perfectly straight lines, so we wanted to try to make sure we were out of the private property, but encompass the floodplain within the open space as we modeled it, as it was modeled. The other thing is there's a lot of storm drain inflows from the community, and there was a lot of erosion on the opposing bank because of the water coming in too quickly. We're going to solve a lot of those problems, so there will be no more loss of that sediment on the opposing banks and everything to assist. And then in addition to that, at the end of the day, to preserve the natural assets of the community, we're looking at planting 175 trees along this channel that vary in sizes and height. So we think it'll really help uplift this community's deteriorating drainage channel through it. This is a more blown up picture, so you can really see how close these units get to this stream. This is far from an ideal situation for a community. People are really concerned, and one of the residents is here with me tonight. We've been working really hard together to try to get these solutions, and she's been a great teammate to try to get stuff signed through the community and things like that. So it's really been a team effort. But when we got down to the lower end of the project, we realized tying into the CA property, there was some easement discrepancies. And really this easement is just clarifying that, making it so you guys, it'll be clear in the future where the floodplain is. We're also doing some temporary easements in those areas for the construction as well. So there's some of those, but those don't need to go through the board for those temporary easements. So it's just this permanent one. We saw an opportunity to fix the floodplain, and that's what we're going to try to do.
Thank you. Jenny?
Yeah, could you help me with, where's the CA property?
Yes.
The lower end, bottom left.
Let me see if I
Down
can
here?
hear. If you look here, this is the CA property down at the southern end that you could see if I go back up down in the bottom right corner here.
Bottom right or bottom left?
About how much is, that you're going to be working on?
So
How
this
much?
green part here is the additional floodplain being added. And then this temporary easement over here is what we need to, because a lot of
How
times,
many acres in whatever you?
it's less than an acre
Okay.
in that area.
Okay, and that's CA land?
And that's CA
Okay,
land,
now,
open space.
Go back to the, frankly, this is a phenomenal project. My congratulations. I assume that's the lady behind you that's been helping you?
Yes, yes.
Okay. This is all CA lien property, correct?
Yes. I mean, it's assessed property, it's on part of, it's part of Long Reach, yeah.
Okay, what I'm getting at is, how did the county land get in the middle of that? Usually that's CA land.
It's a very unusual type of easement. We don't usually see these. And actually, I think, Dennis, the first time we came to you with this, you're like, hey, we got some other communities similar to this situation. Can you see if those easements exist there?
Well, who owns the streamland?
Who owns the what? I'm sorry.
The streamland that cuts through.
They own the streamland. We just have an easement over it.
Who is they?
I believe the community, it all comes up as Wood Creek Community Homeowners Association owns the open space.
Okay.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. I really think we need to understand this because this could be precedent setting and this could be helpful to those of you in other communities where we have a lot of erosion going on. So I'm, for one, trying to understand. So this is an HOA property, not county.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So the county's going in on HOA property to fix the problem.
Because there was an existing easement.
Because there's an
An
easement.
easement by whom?
But that was established when the property was originally subdivided and created. They put this floodplain drainage easement through the property.
For the easement for whom?
It was to count to the county.
With the county, and the county
Yep.
accepted that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was discovered. It wasn't clearly evident at the beginning of the project. We discovered this document after we went through and had our legal department look
Okay.
at it.
Congratulations, you found a loophole.
Yeah. Well, in the community, to be honest, they've come to the county, I guess, in the past, and the county didn't discover the document, so they said, sorry, so they were trying to fix stuff on their own. This last time,
No, I get it. I'm just saying, this is all over the county, all over
Oh, yeah.
Columbia. We've all, poor Dennis has listened to us with, hey, wait a minute, we'll do something about this. Oh, we can't, you know.
Yeah.
So I would thought, maybe there's a way here. Okay.
yeah, they got really fortunate that that easement was through there.
You're not
'cause
kidding.
It gives them a,
You are not kidding.
Alan?
You talked about expanding the floodplain. Is that a legal definition? And if so, does the county decide that?
this actually is, I think because it's disconnected from a lot of the floodplain, it's not actually a FEMA mapped floodplain, but it is a regulated floodplain because more than 30 acres flow to it.
Okay.
So it's not encumbering or creating any type of, it's an open space that CA already owns. If anything, it's increasing the value of that open space from an environmental standpoint because you're preserving floodplain.
Cool, okay.
Brian?
What does, I have two more.
Two more?
Small. What does DBH stand for when it comes to trees?
That is the diameter at breast height.
Breast height, thank you. And not that I want us to, but given that this is a floodplain and that gets decided somehow either scientifically or legally, what would happen if we said no?
If you said no, then we wouldn't fix the floodplain and we'd get a temporary easement over the whole thing. But if somebody came back and looked at it, they would see this weird wonky change in the easement when it crosses the property line. So.
Okay, thank you.
Brian?
Yes, but looking at the plan there, which way is the water flowing?
To the left.
So it's coming up from the top right-hand corner. How much is the water being contributed to by the development as opposed to the actual where the water's coming from? What's the problem up above that's bringing? Where's that water coming from?
I don't know if there's a problem. It is other communities and stuff that are upstream that are draining to it. It's not that they're a problem because.
That's the way things were done. I realise that.
Yeah, it's just there's no. We have zoning requirements, and then we use those zoning requirements to figure out the water that's coming from there. We don't. Sometimes we do measured impervious as well, but in this situation, we would use the zoning of the area to establish.
One final question. One of the things we've learned about the stormwater was you need to go to the source of the water. Has there been an assessment and an evaluation of that upper reach to where that water's coming from? And has any effort been done to mitigate some of that water before it gets in there?
So this is all storm drain systems. This is the first point at daylight. So we are at the very head of the stream at this.
This is all underground. This is one great big outfall that's coming out.
Correct.
Oh, God gracious. Okay,
Josh?
Got it.
All right, so I just want to, because this is my neighborhood, this is my village, and so about 10 years ago now, we had a situation where I feel like as a village, we kind of got shoved under a bus a little bit during the Phelps Luck Elementary renovation, because we saw a finished product and we were like, oh yeah, that's great. We love the finished product. I mean, the school is beautiful. But we didn't know that there was going to be drilling. As it turned out, there was like a last minute decision to have to drill through people's yards to connect a fire hydrant for the trailers. It wasn't part of the original plan. It was inaudible. And for all innocent good reasons, but we kind of got shoved under a bus because the residents wanted to know why was the county drilling in their front yards. And we're like, well, and they swore that Long Reach had approved it. So it wasn't exactly true. It's a bit of a strip. So my concern is just, are we communicating to residents what's going to be done and when, and just want to make sure that residents understand precisely what's going to be done during this process.
Yeah, I mean, we've been pretty upfront.
It's been we've been trying this for 5 to 6 years.
Okay.
So it's been in all the newsletters, but of course we have new people coming and going
Sure.
all the time, so not everybody's going to understand. But we've had to get some easements on properties because there's not enough property for the surveyors if they do their work. They had to work from the owner's property because it's so close to the creek.
Yeah.
Drain. And there's water coming from a whole single-family neighborhood across Phelps Luck into our creek, and we've had to pay for it.
Okay.
There's houses that are losing property, they're close to their patio. I can't walk on it.
Understood.
In my 70s,
Sure.
I can't walk on it because it's these townhouses.
Yeah.
Bill?
Just when you remapped and modeled the flow through this area, is that a GIS shapefile that you ultimately?
Yes, the floodplain could be a GIS.
Would you be willing to share those files with us here at the Columbia Association?
Absolutely, yeah. That's something
that'd be
we would
great.
Glad to do.
And secondly, are there any trees that are going to get removed along the length of this?
There will be, and I do have some pictures of some of the existing conditions. Right here, you can see, I mean, some of these trees are just so undermined that there's no way you're going to save these trees. And they're more a detriment at this point than anything else. Huh? If we had more room to open up the stream, we would do that. But here, really, we just got to get rid of that tree and rebuild that steep bank. So there's going to be a lot of rocks. So for the stream itself, we're really just using stabilization. So you'll see a lot of stone along the bottom, some toe protection to keep that undermining from occurring. That undermines and then the yards drop. That's how they lose that height. Which is a danger, especially when you're next to a floodplain. You lose that ground height. Pretty soon that ground's going to be in the floodplain. So we don't want to that will cause that floodplain to encroach on those properties, which is something we definitely need to do. You know, we don't want to push it onto their property and then they have to pay flood insurance out of the blue. So we want to try to, you know, secure this. The county took responsibility for it at some point. We want to make sure we get it, you know, fixed. So.
Right. And just one last comment, Brian, if you look at the overall map that we had up, the upper right-hand corner of the, there it is.
Yeah.
Upper right-hand corner,
Yes.
there's a CA basketball court in that corner there, so.
There
Where
is-
the outfalls?
We have a temporary access there for construction.
Yeah.
So we will be using that because this is so narrow, we're actually going to be working from in the stream.
Yeah.
With small vehicles because it's just such a narrow in and out.
Yeah, that's right next to the Phelps Luck pool there.
Yeah.
And the neighborhood
But
center.
it's a very neat. It's one of the neat old original neighborhoods.
It's a great
so
part of the
it'll be
community.
neat to help revitalize that.
Thank you.
But lastly, I just wanted to, for schedule wise, we're looking to go to construction this fall.
Okay.
So it is really close to coming in 8 to 12 months of construction, but obviously that's always dependent on budgets. So
Thank you.
if there's any other questions.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
That brings us to our next agenda item, the recommendations for the CA Board of Directors regarding service on other.
Yeah. We've talked
Maybe
about these
quick.
easements, and I was thinking, are any of these we can put on the consent agenda?
No, we vote on easements.
Well, we've done it before where we put easements on the consent agenda. It's approved. I just would like to offer that possibility that if we're not going to object to them, a lot easier to put them on the consent agenda.
I recommend that we have Keith take a look at it, because he's our consent agenda.
And anyway, we're going to move on to the next agenda item. Next agenda item is recommendations on the CA Board of Directors regarding service on other boards of directors for 30 minutes.
Jackie's going to introduce Michelle Cohen.
Yep. Good evening. In your backup to this agenda item, I provided a memo with background information, but very quickly, just to recap that on January 12th of this year, Audit Committee Chair Jim Young presented recommendations on behalf of the Audit Committee that pertain to best practices and characteristics of an effective ethics program. It was titled Recommendations Regarding Governance and Ethics Matters. There were 4 recommendations included there from the Audit Committee, and they were discussed on January 12th at the board work session, and then 2 weeks later, on January 26th, they were discussed again, and at that time, 3 of the 4 recommendations were approved by the board. One of them that had to do with service on multiple boards was tabled. There were a number of questions and concerns regarding implementation here at Columbia Association. So this evening, Michelle Cohen, Senior Counsel for Miles and Stockbridge, will be presenting that recommendation for you, and she will be available to answer any of your questions. And, you know, this will be the recommendation, but particularly management of conflicts of interest surrounding serving on multiple boards. And with that, Michelle.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, and as soon as the slides are ready, we'll start.
And that is gonna. So we'll have to do we'll have to find it. Sorry.
You're going to have to wing it for a few minutes, Michelle.
Yeah. Yeah, it just either break.
To err is human, to really foul things up takes a computer.
While we're waiting, I'll just preface by saying there's maybe 12 or so slides. This may be a little bit more than the very narrow topic that we really want to focus on, but I wanted you to have a complete picture as part of the board materials. The other thing I'll ask once we get started is just to make sure I have time to get through all of the slides, if you could hold questions until the end.
Okay.
And then we can always back up to appropriate slides as necessary.
Okay.
What can you tell us without slides?
I mean, I can go ahead and start talking. I tend to be a visual person, but I'm perfectly comfortable just, I have my notes.
Let's give him another minute to see if we get the slides up, because I think that will be helpful.
Thanks. It's difficult to tell from our phones, so if you could start, sorry about that.
Okay, then just, begin,
So,
please.
I'll go ahead and get started, and like I said, you'll have all of the slide deck for use later. So again, you asked me to come here and give a little bit of information about board conflict of interest, in particular, the situation where you are a director serving on this board, but then also on the board of another organization, such as IAT, where there could be conflicts of interest that come up and how those should be addressed. So just to start from the very beginning, a conflict of interest exists when you are in a position to be improperly influenced, either by personal interests, activities, investments, business relationships, or other associations when you are performing your duties as a director. And I think we all tend to view this in the context of a financial conflict. I mean, that's an easy one to understand, where there's money or compensation involved, or a contract situation, or even a familial situation where perhaps you serve on the board of CA, but a family member is employed by an organization that is maybe requested to do contract work for CA. Those are obvious conflicts. What we're talking about tonight is something a little bit different, and it's the type of conflict of interest that can arise when competing goals make it difficult for you as a director to make decisions that protect the interests of the organization that you are sitting in front of at the time in question. Another way of viewing that, it's called a duty of loyalty, and that is one of the duties that a director owes to its organization. When we talk about a duty of loyalty and conflicts, what we mean is that there can be a conflict of interest where your duty of loyalty to your organization, in this case Columbia Association, is impacted due to your participation in management or direction of another entity, for example, Inter Arbor Trust. That happens even if you've got no personal interest in the outcome, no financial interest in the outcome. It exists. And also, very importantly, it can't be turned on and off. It's not like a light switch. So you always have a duty of loyalty to CA. If you also sit on the board of IAT, you always have a duty of loyalty to IAT. You can't put on one hat and take it off and put the other hat on. And I think that's maybe where some of the confusion, we'll call it, has arisen. I also want to be clear that conflicts of interest are not necessarily bad, and they're not illegal. They happen. They happen all the time. I mean, even in my own firm, it's not unusual for conflicts to arise where I'm representing organization A, who wants to do work that involves organization B, who's being represented by a partner. These things are constant. What's important is that there can be adverse consequences if they're not addressed properly. And that's really, in a nutshell, what I want to get at today. And with perfect timing, it seems like maybe I can get to my slides now.
Thank you.
Of course, now the problem is I actually have to be able to see what I'm doing over there. We'll do the best we can. All right, let me, I thought if I move this switch, it's supposed to.
You're in Power Plan.
Yeah,
Power
hit
Plan,
F,
so you
hit
can
F5 on the keyboard, and it should.
Yeah. Okay, I did say that I have a technological challenge, so I had to be here to get this loaded properly. I was very clear that somebody had to get this set up.
No, you have to go back in and reshare it. You need to click on the meeting and then share screen.
Is it the one I pressed?
You got to open it first. Open it first and then share screen.
Say his name and he appears.
Here comes Sam. You got to get it so I can move the cursor, otherwise I'm not going to be able to. My husband and son tell me that I have an electromagnetic pulse. I'm also the only female in the house besides the poodle, so
That's
I
okay.
get a
We
lot
have
of
great IT staff.
Can you put it in slideshow mode, though?
Put it in slideshow, then I can just move the cursor.
Got to do a few steps to get that.
No, you had it. There it is to the
Lower left.
lower left. See the lower?
There you go. Cool.
Here
we go.
All right, so where did we leave off? Okay, so duty of loyalty. Now, this is, where we left off, and this is the important thing. All right, so as I was saying, duty of loyalty, you can have it to multiple organizations, not a switch. You always have the duty of loyalty, and if it's not handled properly, there can be some pretty significant ramifications. There's a statutory basis for this duty. Columbia Association is, in fact, a non-stock Maryland corporation, and as such is bound by the Maryland General Corporation Law. I gave you the citation, section 2-405, subpart 1B of this code, requires that directors act in good faith, in a manner that you reasonably believe to be in the best interest of the corporation, and with the care of an ordinarily prudent person in a like position. So remember those sort of three prongs. You have to act in a way that you reasonably believe to be in the best interest of the entity. And it must be objectively reasonable, all right? So it's not reasonable if when taking action as a director of CA, you are also considering self-interest or the interest of another party, all right? That is not a reasonable behavior. It's a deliberative process. It's not something that should be a snap judgment. And I would say two additional things here. It's important to remember when undergoing this consideration, it's not what you personally think is best or whether you personally think you can be objective. It's what a disinterested person would think. Would somebody not sitting in your shoes agree that you can objectively represent the interests of the organization that you're sitting in front of today while still being loyal to the other organization? And is your action in the best interest of the organization? The other thing I want to point out is leaving aside the legal language. CA's constituents, the homeowners, really need to have confidence in the integrity of CA and its board. Your reputation can be damaged if it's perceived that the board's judgment is improperly influenced, even if you don't intend it. So again, that's not a legal statement, but it's a public perception statement, something I feel is important in today's environment. So, participation by a director who serves on both sides of a transaction presents an inherent conflict of interest because you have these competing interests. There's just no way around it. You're always going to be privy to confidential and strategic discussions and information. That's why there's always going to be a question whether you can truly be impartial when we're dealing with the duties of loyalty. Now, generally, serving on the CA board and the IAT board is not a conflict of interest. These organizations are similar. You have comparable missions. You're generally aligned in what you want to do for the community, and there's a desire to work together collaboratively. So nobody is saying that you shouldn't be on both boards, and in fact, that's not possible the way IAT is constituted. But there are going to be times when your interests are not aligned, where there is an inherent conflict, and that's when we get into trouble. I also want to just touch real quick on the village board. I know that's probably not the primary concern here, but it is my understanding that those who also serve as representatives to a village board are not voting members. Okay, so in that case, it's a different issue. You have a statutory duty of loyalty to CA. You don't have the same statutory duty to the village board because you're not a voting director. But there's still ethical considerations. So even though it's not exactly the same analysis, it's always a good idea to be mindful when a potential conflict could arise because of this dual relationship and to disclose that. Okay, so that's a small type. When there is a conflict of interest, you have a duty to disclose it. That's the first prong, okay? When in doubt, disclose. When you think there might be a conflict, disclose. The non-conflicted board members then determine whether that conflict can be waived and whether the conflicted director should participate. Where the answer is no, that we can't waive it, the conflicted director needs to back out. They should not be participating in discussion, they should not be advocating, they should not be voting. And I'll go into this in a second in the next slide, but this is really critical because failure to follow the appropriate protocol can have real negative consequences. It can invalidate the board action. It could result in removal of the director. So again, it's not that the conflict can't exist, it's what you do with it once you know you have it. I gave you one other statutory reference. I didn't want to get overly bogged down in court analysis, but Section 2-419 of the General Corporation Code says that when you have a conflict, the contract or transaction that's at issue is not automatically void or voidable simply because the conflict exists if a two-pronged test is met. One, the board must be informed of the conflict, and two, the contract or transaction must be approved by a majority of the non-conflicted director. So you can only rely on this protection to protect the vote if both of these standards are met. Best practice, always, always, always disclose. And if there's any doubt, the best practice is to disclose and recuse. It's just that simple. All right, so I gave a couple of examples, like just scenarios. You can look at these and say to yourself, okay, is there a conflict or not? Could you truly provide a duty of loyalty to each organization in these scenarios? Remembering that it's not whether you personally think you can handle it or that there's no conflict, it's whether a disinterested person would agree with you. So the first one I think is one that's actually happened. IAT asked for a grant for general operating expenses, and I think there was an expectation that that request would be made on a recurring basis. CA staff had recommended against providing the grant. Conflict or no conflict. The other three are ones that I made up, but they're theoretically possible. One, IAT wants to sell Chrysalis, but CA, who owns Symphony Woods, doesn't want a third party owning improvements on CA property. Or IAT wants to acquire some land to build an art center, and they would like CA to give them an interest-free loan for $3 million. CA staff thinks that that's not the appropriate use of funds. Final example, CA and IAT each want to buy the same parcel of land. CA wants to build it for use as a tennis center, fee to play, so that it would be a revenue producer, whereas IAT wants to build a butterfly park and walking trail, no fee, free to the public. Okay, so those are, you could probably come up with more. I tried to come up with some ones that were hopefully pretty straightforward. And for each of those types of situations, the disclosure of the potential conflict would need to be made, and then the non-interested voters would need to make a decision whether this was a conflict that exists and could be waived or not waived. And depending on that answer, the interested directors may or may not be able to participate, and a vote would then be taken. But the vote would be taken by the non-interested members of the board of directors. All right, so I'm going to just wrap up real quick, and then I'll take questions. So the recommendations, I think the key one that we're talking about here is if you serve on both the CA and the IAT boards, you need to recuse yourself from voting on matters in which you serve both sides of the transaction. Otherwise, you really run into concerns that you've breached your duty of loyalty, both to CA when you're sitting on the CA board, but also to IAT. It's okay to present background information, answer questions, but you should recuse yourself from deliberations, voting, being on the committee, etc. If there's ever a question, it's always best to consult with general counsel. You can do a deeper dive into the statute, into relevant case law, and provide better guidance. The last slide I have was just some of the other recommendations that I know were pending out there, and just to throw them out to complete this deck. CA business should be conducted on CA email, shouldn't be using personal email to conduct CA business, shouldn't be using CA email to conduct other business. The idea that a conflict of interest would always exist to the extent CA and IAT were involved, or where they're competitive, like the example I gave where both parties wanted to buy the same parcel of land. Village matters really should be discussed with general counsel. You don't have the same duty of loyalty because you don't have the voting interest on the village board, but you should be mindful of potential conflicts and disclose. If you are a CA board member, you should not be an officer of IAT, and you should not be a voting member of a village board. And then finally, I know there are existing guidelines. Those really should be reviewed and updated by general counsel each year and then presented back to this board for ongoing approval. So that's what I've got. Like I said, I didn't want to go so far in that I spent all the time talking, but I am happy to take questions.
So I'll actually start for change. And so I've got a copy of our charter right in front of me, and I just want to read you an excerpt from our charter and get your opinion of it. On page 6, paragraph 4, it says, the corporation may enter into contracts and transactions with any director or with any corporation, partnership, trust, or association of which any director is a stockholder, director, officer, partner, member, trustee, beneficiary, employee, or in which any director is otherwise interested. And such contract or transaction shall not be invalidated or in any way affected by the fact that such a director has or may have an interest therein, which is or might be adverse to the interest of the corporation, provided that the fact of such interest shall be disclosed or known to the other directors acting upon such contract or transaction. And such director may be counted in determining the existence of a quorum at any meeting of the board of directors of the corporation, which shall authorize any such contract or transaction, and may vote thereat to authorize any such contract or transaction with like force and effect as if he were not so interested.
That is inconsistent with the statute, and I put the relevant section back up for you. The vote needs to be by a majority of the non-conflicted directors.
So this is our charter. So do we need to revise our charter?
I think that would be appropriate.
And with that, we'll go around. Josh.
So and you mentioned the guidelines from the 2015 letter. What specifically about the 2015 letter from our general counsel do you not concur with?
I'm not saying there's anything I don't concur with. It's just as a best practice, again, to look at, and I don't have them in front of me. I'm not going to sit here and try to skim them and give you an answer. It's not that I have a problem with them. It's simply as a best practice, these should be reviewed and updated as needed.
And my next question, well, so I'll let the rest of the group ask, and then I'll come back.
Okay. I'll go around. Alan.
Yeah, a couple questions. You talked about what would protect the vote. From what? From whom?
For example, a homeowner filing a lawsuit to overturn a contract.
Okay. In your example on the Art Center, and I know it was just an example, you specifically said, and CA staff did not want to do it. What if CA staff said, we think it's a good idea?
I thought about that, so thank you for raising it. In that case, I still think disclosure of the conflict is appropriate. But I think in that case, the response of the board would be, that's fine because the interests are aligned. CA staff does not have a problem. In other words, the people who are charged with implementing CA's financial wherewithal are fine with this. It seems like perhaps there's an alignment. Now, there would still be a vote by the board. It may be okay for the interested directors to participate, but you still might not have a majority of directors voting to approve it.
And how does that, the other thing that's true about us is that we are the only members of CA. We are the members of CA. Does that change our abilities, our authority, our rights?
It's an interesting structure. I think for purposes of this discussion, it doesn't because you're acting as directors and you have very specific duties as directors. I would also say, and again, this is going beyond the scope of what I reviewed for tonight's meetings, you are, as a member, also representing the membership of your community. So I don't think that changes the analysis.
Well, that's a murky area
Related to that, I've never done it, but the 3 members of this board who are on the Inner Arbor Corporation board are there ex officio. I mean, they're there because of the requirements of the easement.
No.
Does that change?
Yes.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't. Because again, once they sit on the IAT board, they have that same duty of loyalty to IAT that they do to CA.
And so I would just submit to you that in some respects, from our point of view, and I say I haven't been on that board, so this is from my point of view as a CA board member, the board created those 3 members, which were supposed to be a majority of that board, to be, in effect, watchdogs of that board and representing CA interests on that board. So it would seem to me, I would submit that one way to look at this is that the actual conflict would be something that the Inner Arbor Corporation would want to think about. Do they have camel's nose under their tent rather than the problem on the CA part, because CA wants those people there to find out what's going on and to influence
Yeah,
what's
you're
going on.
raising very good points. That's not, I mean, I have not done an analysis, but I will say that it's my understanding that it's not like IAT can change its bylaws to get rid of the CA board members,
Right.
right? They're there.
Right.
And I know this was an issue in some of the recent unpleasantness. So I think it's important to level set. And the position that I would take is it doesn't matter why they're there. Once they're there, that duty of loyalty attaches. And I think viewing those members as being a watchdog is maybe not the best way of looking at it. I think perhaps more to advocate, well,
To represent.
to represent,
Maybe
advocate.
watchdog was the wrong word.
But that doesn't mean that they go into the IAT board meeting and say, well, I'm also a CA board director, so I have to act in the best
But that's
interest of CA.
IAT's problem, not our problem.
Well, it's IAT's problem, but when they come back and sit here on the CA board, they can only represent the interests of CA.
Right.
They shouldn't be representing the interests of IAT
Right.
on in these meetings.
Right.
But by the same token, when they go into an IAT board meeting, they shouldn't be representing the interests of CA. They're
But that's
representing-
IAT's problem if they do, is what I'm saying.
But
It's not
that's
CA's
not what
problem.
we're talking about. We're talking about.
So how is it, I'm trying to get to how is it CA's problem if we are clear that these people are there to represent our interests?
Because they can't do it in those meetings.
In those meetings, they can't, but here,
Here, everyone is supposed to be representing the interests of CA and CA only. That's why you've got the
it's
recusal.
still just, and I'll get off of it, but it just seems to me this is IAT's problem, not ours.
Right. Dick? Oh, sorry.
As you
Okay.
said,
I'll get back to you.
this is an interesting structure. And we are kind of an unusual organization. And as Alan points out, we have 3 members of our board are put on the Inner Arbor Board to watch out for CA's interests. That is a simple fact of why it's in the easement that we have to have those 3 CA board members on the IA board. Now, and that was what was originally intended. And when this easement was brought up before a previous board, that was the way it was going to be. It was going to be 3 CA board members and 2 outside members. And there was a little last-minute switcheroo there, and the board went ahead with the easement, even though we didn't have the control over our own property that we were supposed to have. I am one of those 3 members who sits on both boards. And I sit there representing CA. I am very concerned about what Inner Arbor does with CA property. And they know that because, there's no secret that I am a crossover board member. And when I come back here, when I sit in this room, my total loyalty is to CA, not to Inner Arbor. I have no conflict in representing CA. And if there's something that I'm aware of through an Inner Arbor board meeting, I will make people aware of that. But I do not, when I sit on that Inner Arbor board, I do not keep things from CA. I am there to protect CA. And this is, as you said, this is a very interesting structure.
It is. And
I resent the idea that I can be prevented from voting on anything that has to do with Inner Arbor. Because when I am here, I represent CA, and I know what the problems are, so I'm probably one of the most informed members of the board when it comes to Inner Arbor matters, and I am then therefore in a position to protect CA. And if I get my vote taken away, and I'll also say in our bylaws you can't take a vote away from a member. If I'm not allowed to say anything in the discussion, even though I know more about it than any other board member, that simply does not fly. That simply does not fly.
I was asked to come here and give a presentation on the duty of loyalty, and that's what I've done. Now, it is up to the board to implement the guidance that they're being given.
Okay.
But I will say it's very clear in the statute. What you have is a conflict. The fact that you don't feel it's a problem isn't the issue.
In the statute, does it say that you cannot vote? In the statute?
It says you have to disclose the conflict,
Yes.
and the non-conflicted directors take a vote on the transaction.
That's in the law, the non-conflicted?
Yes, I cited it.
So, Lynn?
Yeah. Again, as one of these, I was on the trust board for 6 years. I haven't been on it for almost a year now. I understand the issues, believe me. And I think it's very difficult. Things are set up so for different reasons, and I think I'm looking at Sherry Fanaroff's guidelines for CA board members now, and I think it's important that the CA board members who aren't familiar with it understand the way CA and the Inner Harbor Trust have been operating in terms of conflict of interest. If this memo is totally incorrect, and I know you have said it, and the Venable report also recommended we go look at this on an annual basis. When I look at this now, I don't see how this report relates to what we're saying now. This report clearly says CA directors when serving on the IAT board certainly should voice CA's views as expressed by a majority of the CA board in discussion at board meetings. Indeed, this is the reason why they were given a substantial voice on IAT's board. In essence, they serve as a communication conduit between CA and IAT, providing insights to IAT on CA's views with respect to IAT's plans, and likewise providing updates to CA and IAT's progress. However, when sitting as an IAT board member, voting on an IAT matter, the director ultimately must make a decision based on the best interests of IAT. Just as he or she must make a decision based on the best interests of CA when voting as a CA board member. This basically gave, I think, the crossover board members the feeling that we could represent, be fully representative on both boards. That is obviously an inherent conflict.
Well, just to be clear, Lynn, you're not always going to have it's not.
Oh no, there are
the participation, the discussion, the giving CA information. I will leave it to IAT and its counsel to give direction on conflicts for that organization. I don't know that Sherry's memo is necessarily inconsistent with what we're saying today. What I'm focusing on are situations where you're taking, where you're actually talking about contracts, relationships, maybe issues where you're in conflict, really in conflict with each other. And that's where you get into the situation of disclosure and potential recusal.
Bill?
Just for everybody's consumption, the Fanaroff memo was contemplated at a time when CA was prepared to donate $1.6 million in seed money and then allowed IAT to become self-sustaining, so that when the issue of grant money would come up, CA would not be the person or the entity that would provide that money. And this is where the conflict is surrounding. It was not going to be 10 years of sending money to IAT, and that's what this is written as. It's absent any direct donation, that's what is written in that letter. That is where the conflict is. You have to understand you cannot write the check on one board and cash the check on the other board. That is an ethics problem. That is a conflict.
Wouldn't that have been an ethics problem back in 2015, 16,
No,
17?
because what they decided was we will give you a lump sum money as seed money to start, and then you will get the money that you need on your own. That's what that was written around. That was the basis, that was the agreement.
How do you know
That's
that?
changed.
How do you know
Because
that?
that's what the vote was when that happened.
One person at a time.
All right.
I'll go Josh.
All right, thank you. I want to speak to Bill's point, I'm reading a quote, a direct quote from a member of this board back in 2013 when this was created, that I think might address where you're going with this. And this was Tom Cole who's a lawyer, prominent lawyer here in town.
Big supporter of the IAT.
Right, and his exact words,
Well, no.
his exact words, April 25th, 2013, identifying and resolving a conflict of interest is primarily the responsibility of the individual board member who has that conflict. We set a very dangerous precedent by excluding board members on conflict of interest grounds unilaterally by board decision. You can easily see how this could be abused by a less benevolent board to shut down minority views or shift a vote. That was Tom Cole specifically talking about this conflict of interest, proposed conflict of interest that exists between Inner Arbor Trust and the Columbia Association.
Right.
So,
And I think in the order of most of the decisions between the two boards, that holds. But when you have something like grant money on the table, that's when you have to draw the line and say, hey, there is a conflict here large enough that we need to have recusal or some sort of alternate method here. Because state statute says we got to follow and be loyal. That's what this is about.
Without any, assuming there's no one's against this, I'd like to add another 20 minutes of discussion.
Yeah.
Keith?
So, not a lawyer.
Good decision.
Did you play one on TV?
No, I don't even play one on TV.
Did you stay at a Holiday Inn Express?
There's two things that I feel like we're discussing, because there's the law, and I just went and I looked up what I signed when I joined the IAT in terms of disclosure, and there's this duty of loyalty. So I think based upon that, what we're talking about, it's clear that what we're outlining, what we're arguing against is, we can't really argue against it. We have conflicts of interest within this, and we need to follow that. So that's the law. The second piece is trying to understand how we can even execute this, because I also heard not just voting, but I heard about information. So the sharing of information, and as I understood some of that, at least as I understand my role, my responsibility is to share and gather information, because the only reason I'm on the IAT board is because the chair said, hey, would you like to be on the IAT board to represent CA? So my understanding is that I should be able to share information.
Yes.
Now, on the voting standpoint, I get that there are places when I have to exclude.
Let me address that, because maybe I was not clear. Yes, it's not inappropriate, double negative. It would be appropriate for you to present information and answer questions. To your point, I think that's one of the reasons why you're here. The point was that you would recuse yourself before the board goes into deliberations. And again, I don't really want to talk about the IAT board because I'm not representing them, so can we flip it around?
Sure.
Let's say it came up here. You might want to present factual information regarding IAT's position, but you would not participate in the deliberation of this body in whether to approve or disapprove a motion.
Okay, and if I may just to follow that along, the way that we operate here, which is something I'd love to discuss a little bit further, but the way that we operate here is that we have to get a motion and a second in order to begin any discussion on an issue. So automatically we're thrown into deliberation, is as I'm understanding that. So what I'm trying to understand is, how do I bring information and update on a topic that's going on if I'm already in the middle of deliberation?
I would defer maybe to Eric on this, but perhaps if you knew that something was coming up.
So I will actually try to address this as best I can. So as chair, I have one responsibility is I do appoint members to IAT. And so it seems like that presents me an opportunity to take away 2 votes based on your recommendations. And 2, I've got to basically follow our governing documents. So our governing documents consist of the charter, then the bylaws, then policy. And the question I have is, given what I just read in the charter, how, as chair, am I supposed to implement your suggestions?
You have to follow the law first.
You'd follow the law.
Follow the law, yeah.
The process is actually pretty straightforward, but I think for this particular question, if we know that there's going to be something presented that's likely to lead to this conflict issue, I would address that head on, give your presentation the same way I'm sitting here giving factual information, and then you would recuse when the motion is taken and the body goes into deliberations. Okay. I mean, that would just be one suggestion I would throw out.
Dick?
I'd just like to add that the CA board does choose who's going to serve as a crossover representative. And the CA board can, if they think that the person is not supporting CA as opposed to CA or is giving favorable, is being favorable to Inner Harbor, that person can be yanked off the Inner Harbor board. That is an option. That is an option that this board has.
I can't comment on, and that certainly is feasible, but that doesn't negate the obligations under the statute.
Right.
Ginny?
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. You were talking about when to use CA email, and pretty much it was saying only can use it for CA business, correct?
I mean, you should. Look, I'll just give you an example. You know, obviously I have a Miles and Stockbridge email. I don't use it for personal business.
No. See, that's the problem, is what is personal business? For example, if a constituent contacts you that lives in the village that you represent, there shouldn't be a problem responding with the CA.
I would think that if they're coming to you in connection with a CA matter, that would be true.
Well, see, that's where it gets a little schizophrenic. I mean, if you're elected to represent people in a village.
Shouldn't use medical terms.
I'm sorry. We'll try for another.
Just not to offend.
No, I mean, what I'm saying is, if you're elected to represent people in a village, okay, and they have an issue, a problem, a concern, they contact you. It may or may not be CA related. It may be, we've had it, or at least I have, where I'm unemployed during COVID. Can you help me out? Well, I'm not going to say, sorry, that's not CA. I'm going to work to help that person.
Wouldn't you use your personal email account for that?
I can't hear you. What?
Would you not use your personal email account for that?
No. They contacted me because I represent them. That's the issue. And I represent them as what? As a CA board member. That's what they elected me, or didn't elect me. But anyway, that's what I'm there for. No, I totally disagree with you on that. It'll get too confusing. I am supposed to be responsive. Now, how I handle that is, I won't get into that, but that's just ridiculous. I mean, really, you're going to confuse the heck out of people. So anyway, let's move on to another thing. I think we're getting a little, in my opinion, too rigid on this whole thing.
Well, if I can I ask about the CA board email?
Sure.
Sure.
You got a question?
Can I get?
Yeah.
I'll give up the floor for a second.
It'll be quick because I'm in the middle of this now, and I just want to really understand. So again, I was placed on the IAT due to my role on the CA board. So the way that I saw that is, it made clear sense to me that I should just be using the CA board email to do all of my business. So I'm just under what we were discussing, because not that I have to agree, but I agree that we have to follow the law. How does that go against the law to utilize the CA email to facilitate business?
So I'm not saying that that's a legal requirement. It's a recommendation. It's a best practice. And again, we're kind of getting a little far afield of some of the specific issues I was researching for tonight. But I would say that, and I understand you wear two hats. To me, there's a difference between communicating with your fellow CA board members when they're asking you questions about an IAT matter. But they're asking you the question because you are a CA board member who is also serving on the IAT board. In that situation, it might make more sense to me that you're using a CA email address. But if you were dealing with a community member on an IAT matter,
business, yes.
I would think then you would use your IAT email address, assuming you have
Okay.
I don't think there
I understand that.
any.
Can I get the floor back?
Jenny.
I yield back.
Okay, Jenny.
Waive consecutive interpretation.
Two more quick questions. We've had people on this board serve on other things. We keep talking about IAT, but they also have served on the Downtown Partnership, maybe the Howard County Chamber of Commerce. And they would come back and recommend funding for that organization, or funding as a member of an organization. That's okay?
Okay, well, so I focused on IAT. That's what I was asked to look at.
I know,
but the analysis is the same. Sorry, I'm going to answer the question. So if you, for example, were serving as a CA board member, but were also on the board
Well, now, a CA board member includes the president, CEO.
Okay. Non-voting.
Okay.
Well, I don't know about.
Non-voting.
Non-voting.
Yeah. But let's just, I'm
That's
just
on the
using
board
you as an
operations
example.
committee.
Let's say you are a board member on the CA board, and you are also a board member on the Howard County Chamber of Commerce. The same analysis I just went through is going to apply.
Okay.
So in that scenario, you shouldn't be coming to CA advocating for money for the chamber. You would be disclosing you have a conflict if that question ever came before this group.
Okay, or staff shouldn't do that either, for any membership in anything, or,
No, this is where you're serving as a board member. I mean, like, for example, Susan is not a board
all right,
member.
I don't want to beat this to death, but if you're ex officio on a board, I think that should be a problem.
The statute says board. It doesn't say staff, it says board.
So the statute does not apply to senior staff.
But
It does, the
does apply to
statute
the-
doesn't apply to senior staff. That is not to say that your ethics policy doesn't apply to senior staff. We're talking about this conflict of interest issue, which is really related to board service. And that's why, for example, I tried to distinguish between the IAT situation, which is a board-to-board situation, versus a village association, which is CA board versus a village rep.
Okay, last question, and I think my colleagues have raised a lot of really good points, but on the village board, the fact that we serve on a village board, is it a conflict then if we vote on the management contract, or if funding the village boards is in the budget every year?
Great question. Again, the situation is a little bit different. I'm working off an assumption, which I received confirmation on, so I'm assuming it's correct, that you do not vote on the village board.
That is
You
true.
don't vote on the village board, but you vote for the budget.
Yeah.
Their budget, you vote for a management contract as to what a percentage they will get every year of the grant, or grant they'll get, et cetera.
And I think that
It's significant money.
it's a little bit different because, again, your duty of loyalty is to CA,
Okay, all right.
not to the village association. So presumably, when you are voting on those contracts, you are viewing it solely from the perspective of the interests of CA. That it
Okay.
makes sense to do the
Okay,
allocation.
so the last point, and then I'll quit.
Could I ask
is
a clarifying
duty-
question? Whoa,
duty of
one
loyalty,
person at a time.
And I'm finished. Duty of loyalty. So you really believe, or your opinion says, that you do not believe that we can sit here, which is the same thing on the county council, same thing on the, in the House of Delegates, where I had that experience when we were never told we couldn't vote. You really believe that we really cannot perform on one board, say the IAT, in an objective way, and also when we come here and we sit down, we are going to take into consideration what is best for CA. That's what we're elected to do here. You don't believe that we can do that, huh?
It doesn't matter what I believe. The point is whether it is a conflict. Whether you can objectively work around that conflict, it doesn't matter. It's what a disinterested third person would think.
So we could acknowledge it as a possible conflict, and we could also say, without without telling people that are on the IAT that they can't vote, we could say, yes, they can vote, because they are a board member, you cannot take their vote away. And we could say, we don't see it as a problem, correct?
Well, no. The transaction itself has to be approved by the non-interested director.
Well, that's what you're saying.
That's what the code says.
What the state says.
I mean, look, it's up to you. But if you do not want to conform to Maryland state law, I can't force you to do it. All I can do is give you my opinion.
I got a question from Alan.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see anything up there that distinguishes, as it says, it's about board members. It doesn't say voting or not voting.
Well, a non-voting board member is not going to vote anyway.
They're not going to vote, but they could participate in deliberations. They could serve on both boards.
Well, you can serve on both boards. I mean, that's
So when I serve on my village board, do I owe a duty of loyalty to my village board?
it's not the same because you don't vote. You're a representative, right? You're not a board member.
I am a board member. I'm a non-voting board member, but I am a board member.
Okay, well then I would need some clarification. I was told that village reps are not.
All village reps are ex officio
Like
board
Dennis is a
members,
board member of this board.
but they generally, I assume all the villages have the same rule that they cannot vote.
Okay, well, then so let's back up. I don't represent the village associations. It is up to the village association to decide whether how much you get to participate.
Right.
But as a non-voting board member, it's not the same duty of loyalty.
And where does it say that in the statute?
Because this section talks about voting.
Where does it say talk
But
about
also,
voting?
you also talked about deliberations.
Well, right, so.
And I participate in deliberations in my board, even though I don't end up voting.
That's between you and your village association. Here, you should disclose that there is a relationship, but you're not required to conflict yourself out. Because it's treated differently. You're not a voting member.
Treated by whom differently?
By this organization. Your duty of loyalty is to CA.
Right, sure.
I think it's appropriate to disclose the fact that you are also your village representative, and this is something that directly affects the village. But it's not a conflict in the way it would be if you were a member of the IAT board.
So when I advocate for my village to get 3 extra swimming pools, that's not a conflict in this?
I mean, your duty is to CA. If you think it's in CA's best interest that your village should have 3 swimming pools.
But apparently it's not whether I think it's in the CA's best interest, whether a reasonable person who's not sitting in my position
So whether
would
you think
agree.
a reasonable person would think that your village should have 3 swimming pools more than everybody else, And then the rest, and then your co-directors can vote whether you're right.
Dick?
Taking this fundamentalist approach to conflict of interest puts the board in a funny position because as we are members of the board, we are also residents of Columbia. So when we vote on something like the assessment, or when we vote on things like the village management agreements, we are conflicted.
Well, if you feel that you're conflicted, you should recuse yourself.
Everyone would have to recuse
We all
himself.
have to recuse ourselves.
Well,
Because everybody pays the
if
assessments.
everybody here felt that they were conflicted to that extent, I guess you would all
We
have to.
wouldn't be able to set a rate and cap.
I'd like to think that that's not going to happen. I mean, I think we're getting a little far afield.
Josh?
And I asked this, there is an instructive comparison. Years ago, when we voted to build Haven on the, I wasn't on the board, but I'm sorry, I used the royal we. We voted on Haven on the Lake, the big fancy fitness, wellness spa downtown. There was a member of this board whose spouse was a massage therapist. Acupuncturist, I apologize. And was told that he was conflicted out and couldn't vote because the services that would potentially be offered by Haven on the Lake would compete with his spouse's business. And so he had to recuse himself. And we keep talking about the Inner Arbor Trust, so I ask this as a comparison. If you're part of an organization, because the Inner Arbor Trust has competitors. There are players in this community who would like to see their demise. Would like to take pieces of their programming. If you're a part of one of those organizations that is a competitor to the Inner Arbor Trust, would you also have to potentially recuse yourself in a matter?
Potentially you would because, again, conflict of interest. We've been talking about this duty of loyalty, but you're getting back to familial relationships, business relationships, contract relationships, financial relationships.
Understood.
So I don't know enough about the facts to know whether that was an appropriate decision at the time.
Okay.
But I could see why it came up.
I understand. All right, thank you.
Bill?
I just wanted to go on the record and say I'm getting a growing concern here that we're having this Perry Mason exceptional clause that maybe we can trick ourselves to not apply state law to our operations. We're a corporation that's incorporated in the state of Maryland. We need to follow the law. We should read the law and take it from there and not discuss, well, we're unique and somehow exceptional from the law. Can we please just look at the law and say this is where our power derives and this is the order in which we must follow? I'd like to center the conversation back around that a little, please.
I'll say it does get a little confusing because last meeting, we all voted on our own property assessments.
Right.
Every one of us.
That's an individual resident and a board. That's not 2 boards there. Stop trying to make this some sort of exceptional thing. Moreover,
No conflicts.
all
It's a
homeowners
financial.
associations provide assessments. All of them do. So all homeowners associations, they didn't create this entire thing to just throw it in the trash and say, aha, I never thought of that. Let's try and get back to real things here and not get into the trickery here.
Well,
not trickery,
Bill,
it's a valid question.
if I can answer your question, and I think part of the reason we're having this discussion is, and I have no problem following the law, and I value what you're saying to us, I value what you're saying to us, but the problem is this notion of conflict of interest has been weaponized. We have had people weaponize this and use that term very loosely, very capriciously, and I think it serves more so to advance an ideology than to address actual ethical misconduct. And I think that's why we need to have this discussion, and why I think there were some wounds. There were some wounds, and that's why people want to share these scenarios. I don't think it's a gotcha. I think it's just there was a lot of deep cutting wounds, and when you're a volunteer and people question your integrity, that hurts. That cuts someone. That's cutting, and people want to address that.
Can I say something? 'Cause I think you make a very valid point. Understand that part of the reason why adhering to the statute is beneficial is I think it takes some of the weaponization out. If you're conflicted, you step out and let the non-conflicted directors have their vote. And then the fingers can't be pointed. You're following the appropriate protocol, and you're acting in a way that is clearly representative of the interests of the organization.
Yeah, a couple more. Andy?
Yeah, just a couple things. First, a question for you, Michelle. So, let's say there's the grant vote for IAT. So you're on the IAT board and you excuse yourself. Okay. Now the whole budget comes up. Now you can vote on the budget, right? Because the vote was already taken whether or not the grant is in. If the grant's in there, you didn't vote. But on the bigger thing, you can still vote.
You can still vote on that because the conflicting issue's been resolved.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, if I wasn't clear, the fact that there's a conflict doesn't mean that the vote can't be in favor of the conflicting issue.
Right.
I mean, if bad with math, but you subtract out the two people who are IAT members, and the majority of everyone else in the room votes to approve it anyway, it's approved.
Yep. And the other thing I wanted to point out for Ginny, the law up there is corporate law, and it applies to us because we're directors. It does not apply to the county council. It does not apply to the state legislature. It does not apply to any elected official under the government, not us, we're directors. And that's the difference. So you can do things, as county council, as state legislature, that do not conflict. But because we're directors and we're operating under corporate law, it's a conflict for us.
So we're
a question on that?
Okay.
On the law?
Yeah, really quickly.
Yeah, okay, 2-419. So is this whole thing dependent on really an individual, say the IAT representative saying, I may have a conflict, but if they don't personally think they have a conflict and they say nothing, there's no vote, right?
Well,
nobody else can accuse them of a conflict. So what I'm saying, for this to go into effect, and then if a person has to say,
I'll actually want to interject one thing. Everyone knows who's on the IAT board. It's public knowledge.
Yeah.
So it's already been disclosed that Keith and Dick are on the IAT board.
And it's a reasonable, objective person, not the person themselves.
Right.
It's a reasonable, objective person.
I'm speaking. So that's all public knowledge. Dick, really quickly, because we're out of time.
Okay, I'd just like to extend this conflict of interest thing. And this is an actual situation. Let us say there's a board member, or more than one board member, who has accepted campaign contributions or whose campaign has been subsidized by a corporate interest should that person recuse themselves?
I'm not in a position to discuss campaign finance issues at all. If you'd like me to research that, Eric, Susan, Dennis, call me later.
Okay.
Give me the whole
Dennis?
I was just to close it up, I think what we asked for is an IAT opinion, and we're going far afoot of that.
Right.
My opinion would be anything that we decide to adopt should be focused on IAT because it's a very unusual circumstance. And then we can, if we want to take each piece as we go, I'm good with that.
Keep in mind, if we're going to eventually have to draft a greater policy, so it's going to apply not just to IAT, it's going to apply, it's going to be more.
It can carve it out because we have a specific and special easement that allows us to carve these things out and to determine how we want to move forward.
Dennis?
So I would say that there's nothing in the law that says you can't vote if you're on the IAT board. It says you have to go through a certain number of steps. And if the non-conflicted members agree in quorum to allow it to happen, then it happens. This is not taking away necessarily taking anyone's voting rights.
That wasn't my understanding of what she said. She said the non-conflicted members must agree to the decision.
Well, first off, the non-conflicted directors are the ones that would vote on the transaction. But I also will say, Dennis, that the recommendations that came from Venable,
That's what I'm looking at.
which my firm would second, is that just given this relationship, there's just an inherent conflict. I mean, again, not every IAT-CA discussion is a conflicting discussion. But if you're talking about a contract, a transaction, an agreement, something where you're both going after the same thing, it's an inherent conflict. I just don't see a way around that.
So, wait, we're out of time. So, and if
I want to raise you say it's an inherent conflict. There are those, I don't, but there are those of us in this board, perhaps a majority, who believe that funding the Inner Arbor Trust is in CA's best interest because they're taking care of our land, they're improving our land, they're providing service to the community, and our purpose, it used to be on the board, there it is for providing service to the community. So in that case, a grant to Inner Arbor Trust could be seen as to CA's benefit.
Mm-hmm. And again, presumably, if enough people in this room agreed with that position, the conflicted members would recuse, but you'd still have quite a few people here. If the majority of those people said, yeah, we think the grant should be given, you can vote to approve the grant.
So I'm going to finish up here, and I've got a couple of questions because we're out of time. First, this is scheduled for a vote in the next meeting. The issue I have is whatever we're voting on, it seems like it's in direct conflict with our charter. So it would seem like if we're going to do anything that's impactful, we would actually have to modify our charter. So that would require a 2/3 consensus of the board, and I think there's be several other steps that would need to occur.
Eric, can I make a suggestion on that? Because I agree with you. I don't think amending the charter is that easy to do. I haven't looked at your charter in a while, but I feel like amending it's not that simple.
Toothpaste back in the tube.
If that's the concern, can we kind of take that offline and I can talk with some other folks in my firm and see if there's a workaround that allows you to adopt something that's consistent with the code without actually having to amend the charter? If there is a way.
That's fair. Certainly I would like to get.
It's just a suggestion to see if we can.
That's.
See how we vote on it the next time.
That's where I'm going with this. Is I'm not quite sure that we can take a vote on this at the next meeting based on
what this is.
I've got the floor. The second question I have is and this is a question on law. So you basically say the non-conflicted members. Can the non-conflicted members vote to allow? So the non-conflicted members can vote to allow the conflicted member today to vote, as stated in the statute. Can the non-conflicted members vote to allow any member in the future to vote? So could we just pass a resolution that says IAT members are always allowed to vote?
No, because it's a case-by-case determination. Not all conflicts are the same.
And the third question I have is, would this all go away if IAT board members weren't allowed to vote in IAT board meetings? Would all the conflicts just disappear?
No, because
But you said they would
conflict
in our
when they're in
village.
their meetings, and there's a conflict when.
Yeah, but if they're not allowed to vote in their meetings, just like we're not allowed to vote in our village meetings.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So if we took away their vote in the IAT meetings.
I don't know that you can do that. I mean, that's for IAT to decide.
Well, that wouldn't be in our interest as a corporation.
Right.
Then now you've gotten around in a circle.
I think what I would say, because again, don't forget, we're talking about this in the context of IET primarily, but it applies to any organization. We don't have a situation where a majority of people in this room are serving on both of these boards. I don't know if that's necessary. Is this like a monthly occurrence where there's a conflict?
Well, it's not necessarily a monthly occurrence, but there's some fairly significant issues that come to the board. And so when there's a significant issue that comes to the board, such as an IET grant, what you're proposing gives the chair a lot of voting power, because I get a vote, but I can also take away two people's votes by saying, okay, you're on the IET and you're on the IET. So I've effectively.
Well, but you can't do that. I mean, that's
individual.
It's not like you have a unilateral power to say yes you can or no you can't. People in this room have that.
Well, the people in this room could.
Yeah.
I guess the people in this room could take that.
The people on the IAT board still have the ability, as we were talking about, before you go into deliberations, to answer questions, give information, explain why the ask is being made. So it's not like they lose their voice.
Could you, that sounds like deliberation to me. Could you help us get to what's the difference between that and deliberation?
So I think what you're proposing is that before we have an IET-related vote, I have to call another vote for everyone that isn't on IET to allow the people on IET to vote.
No.
That's not what you're saying.
Let's use today's meeting as an example. We had representatives from Howard Hughes get up and talk. We had Jessica got up and spoke. Enterprise spoke. So they weren't part of your deliberations. They were presenting factual information. So that's what I'm talking about.
But you also said answer questions. That sounds like deliberations to me.
Well, I mean,
there's no there's no motion on the table.
Where does it start? Where does it end? I'm just not clear on that.
I think the deliberations thing is kind of confusing.
I mean, let's focus on voting.
The deliberations
focus on voting.
is the motion is made. If the motion is seconded, now we're going to argue about it.
Okay.
That's the deliberation.
So that's where deliberation starts, when a motion is seconded.
Right now we're just discussing this. This is a work session, not a meeting.
But I was just trying to give
an example. But I guess the point is, there's a couple of different options we have. We could amend the charter, which is not easy. We could take away IET board members' right to vote on IET board meetings. That would also not be easy, and that would have to go through IET. Or we could just have a pro forma vote before every single IET-related motion, where the non-IET members vote to allow the IET members to vote.
Is that a possibility?
That's what you said.
I have a fourth option, and that's to follow the law, because
that's what I'm trying to understand what the law says, and the law. The way you've explained it is that the non-voting members can vote to allow the conflicted members
to vote.
No,
I don't think she said that.
Conflicted directors have to be the ones voting on the.
Oh, I thought you said that.
No,
I missed
we've
that.
been clarifying.
Mr. Chairman.
We finished. I don't know. We finished our time.
Yes, I realize
and think She's made her. Not say she. I apologize. You've made your case and done what we asked you to do.
What?
Mr. Chairman, you've gone on for a while, and I need to provide a counterpoint. This recommendation should be voted on, and I will go so far to say it should be adopted because it is a sound ethical principle. The actual nuts and bolts of how we get there are to be determined after the recommendation is adopted. We adopted a recommendation to create an entire training program on ethics. Nothing has been done on that yet, but we adopted the recommendation freely because we understood it was a sound ethical principle. That's what we should be voting on. You're getting into minutia and the mechanics. We need to vote on the recommendation.
I'm the chair. I care about mechanics.
Well, I care about mechanics too.
That's what I have to deal with, is mechanics. And the mechanics basically state is, if we're voting on a policy that's...
No, we're voting on a recommendation.
We're voting on a recommendation which is below policy. If we're voting on a recommendation, in the grand hierarchy of things, recommendation is below policy, which is below bylaws, which is below charter. We haven't actually accomplished anything, because the charter will still supersede the recommendation. Now, granted, state law is above that, so the state law supersedes the charter. I get all that. So again, what we need to do is figure out how to basically untangle all this. Because again, yes, we are unique, which means we have some very specific things that we need to untangle. And simply passing a policy or a recommendation doesn't solve the problem mechanically from my perspective as the chair.
So
But
can
the
we
absence
just
of
follow
passing that is going to put us in greater danger. That's what I'm saying.
Can we just follow what the chair had recommended, and that is to have to review the charter?
Yes,
and find a path, and then we can
that's
bring
we don't need to pass that. We can just do it.
Right.
And that's just legal advice.
Could I ask, what is the text of the recommendation that we'll be voting on in 2 weeks?
I'm not sure what we actually are voting on in 2
Well,
weeks.
I'm not either.
What I have on here is not necessarily.
I mean, this is just a memo.
Right.
We don't have anything to.
We have a
Supposed to have it for a vote next
We have
time.
a
I don't know what's
draft.
It was in the, it was resolution number 3. That was in the prior recommendations.
So what?
It's in the current
Yeah. So what?
I don't
So
have my
Dennis,
computer, sorry.
Dennis, what I'd recommend is pulling this for vote, pulling this from the vote next meeting, and let's come up with a way ahead with legal counsel. Is that reasonable?
It's, I mean, that's exactly what Keith just recommended.
Okay, sounds good.
We have a vote on an ethics draft
That's not.
coming up at the next meeting.
No.
Yeah. So
And
this is the.
Enforcement.
you could, if people want to accept the draft, they could amend the conflict of interest section of the draft.
Okay. That's
And I'll even write an amendment that'll take this into consideration for everybody's consideration.
okay. Thanks. Let's go on to the next topic. Topic E. Presentation of the timeline. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Presentation.
Can we get a copy of the slides?
I sent it over to Susan.
Good, thank you.
Presentation on the timeline for hiring the next CEO.
Time.
Monica, the time on this is 20 minutes.
Thank you.
Keeping our tech folks busy.
The problem is Rose set up CA like a town council. And we're built as a board.
Or scroll. I think you just scroll. Use those.
Oh, that's what you got here. Okay.
Use the white.
Yeah.
scroll.
Oh, this is what they're planning on doing this year.
All right, good evening, everyone.
Hi.
My name is Monica McMillan Ajayi, and I am the Director of Human Resources, Diversity, and Inclusion here at CA. And at the request of the board, I am here to present a potential timeline to recruit a president and CEO. This potential timeline is not etched in stone. The goal here is to provide a potential timeline that could take us, that would start May 1st and end with us having a CEO in place effective May 1, fiscal year 25. So the first step in the process would include the board starting May 1, putting together a draft of an RFP, which would include a scope of work, working together as a team to finalize that scope, and then ultimately have an RFP ready to be posted to our website. That also would include working with procurement to get that finalized and ready for the website. And the goal would be to ultimately put it up there and have it maybe in June through July. But it would have to go up in time for the proposal to be up there for 3 weeks, because that is part of the procurement process. The next step would be to review the RFPs that come in. That could take anywhere from July 15th through August 15th in this scenario. And the goal would be for the board to select finalists from the firms who submit their proposals. The next step would be to select the final company and then communicate with that company that they've been selected. And that could take place anywhere between August 21st through the 25th in this scenario. That firm who has been selected would then do a project kickoff with the board. And as part of that kickoff, that would include talking with the board about expectations. It would also include talking about who would be part of the interviewing process to select the next CEO, and that firm would typically provide information about how they go about finding candidates, and also putting together a timeline to accomplish the goal of selecting a CEO. So that could happen around September 11th based on this rough draft timeline. Let's see. The next step in the process would typically entail that firm then meeting with the board again to provide to get input from the board around some things that they'd like to see in the draft recruitment brochure. So that brochure obviously would contain the announcement, things that the board would want to see also in the brochure to attract candidates. So that could take place anywhere from September 18th through October 2nd. And then the next step in the process would include CA actually reviewing the brochure, finalizing it, and then telling that firm that they've approved the brochure. The next step in the process then really begins the recruitment. So the firm would essentially put the announcement out roughly around October 23rd, make it available to potential candidates. And then the next step in the process from there could be that the firm reaches out to various candidates. Now, candidates could come to the firm via their own networks. So, it's very common for firms to reach out to networks and advise them to apply for the job. And once that happens, they would apply, and then also other candidates would apply just from the job announcement. And that could happen anywhere between December 4th and the 18th, that the firm would start to review all of the candidates who've applied for the position. The next step in the process would be that the firm would then look at all of the candidates' information and then start to decide, okay, who's really qualified for this job, and then ask the candidates to complete assessments, the ones that they deem to be individuals who really qualify. The next step in the process would be that the firm would put together a report. And in that report, they would put semifinalist information together and provide it to the board. That could happen around January 29th. And then once that happens, we move again to the firm really narrowing it down to about 4 or 5 people after they've looked through all of the semifinalists. And that could happen around February 5th. Excuse me. It's a little small here. The next step in the process could involve the firm then doing a background check on the individuals who are deemed to be finalists for this position. The firm would then present the background information report to the board. So then the board could then decide, okay, who do we really want to bring in to talk to and to actually be part of interviewing with a panel. And again, the panel could be the board, including some staff members, and then there could even be community members who are taking part in this interview process. The next step would be for the board to discuss the feedback from the interviews. So that could take place somewhere between March 4th and the 8th. And then as we move down a little bit more here, the board could then decide who they would want to make an offer to. The firm would then assist the board with putting an offer together. The board would finalize the offer that they had help with from the firm. And then ultimately, an offer would go out to a candidate. The candidate would accept. and that candidate could be on board anywhere between the end of April and, or I should say sometime in April, and ultimately, though, by May 1st, fiscal year 25. So again, this is a very rough draft hypothetical of what a timeline could look like, provided it started May 1st of this year and had us go through May 1st of fiscal year 25. So I'll take questions.
Ginny?
Yeah, thank you, very comprehensive. Just two questions. One, is there any consideration here for the board to maybe have the chair to appoint a subcommittee to select the finalists on the firms?
Absolutely.
And present it to the board does the final vote, but it makes it, we had that last year, 2 years ago, and it made it a lot easier when you had 5 people on the board interviewing a lot of the firms and then presenting the analysis to the board. So that's one thing. The second, there's no room here for second interviews, and that was something we did last year because we, just on a certain number of candidates, we felt a second interview was really important. So there's no timeline here for that. That's it. Thank you.
So I would say that, I mean, again, this is a very rough draft timeline just to get us through, what it could potentially look like. But there's always room to decide what should happen when, what other steps you might want to take throughout this entire timeline. So this is very, very flexible.
Great job.
Dick?
This is a terrific job. I think you've hit all the right spots. Just one thing that concerned me is you have a couple of dates that fall in August, and we don't usually meet in August, so you might want to work around that. But very nice.
Bill?
Just kind of following on what Dick said, the timeline from May 1st to September 1st, I'm trying to quantify what would require action of the entire board during that time frame. Could you highlight where the board interaction on that part would be? In just those first 3 months there, May, September, probably like the first 5 boxes or five rows.
So quantify what again? I'm sorry.
Basically bold where the board would take action.
Yeah, board action for any of these here.
Okay. So here is where the board would actually get together and draft a scope of work for the RFP.
Okay.
And so, it could take anywhere between May 1st to the 30th, depending on schedules and things of that nature, how often you feel that you need to meet to kind of get that done.
Right, because we'll have all new people, well, not all, but many new people, probably, I may not be here, I'll tell you that.
Wishful thinking.
And you would, if the vote had to be taken on the draft, it would have to be done on the 3rd Thursday in May then, right? So, or 4th Thursday. I get you.
And again, just trying to provide some parameters around what it could potentially look like.
I want to make sure everybody that may or may not be here are up to that, because it's going to be hectic. It's normally hectic anyway, but it adds a little to it.
Keith?
So, having been part of other selection type processes, usually there needs to be a clear understanding of what we're looking for, what the challenges are, what works, what doesn't work in terms of in the organization. Would you feel that needs to occur prior to the May 1st timeline, or would you feel that comes once we've approved a search firm and we need to understand a little bit better what we're looking for? Like, at what place do we need to have clarity on where this board's going?
So I would say, since it will be a new board at that point, I would say in here, May 1st through the 30th, I do think some significant discussion would need to take place with the board members. And at that point, then you can decide what you want to put out as a scope of work so that, the different firms would be able to decide whether or not they, feel they could meet the challenge. And so once that's done, and that's why, too, there's a little bit more room in here as well, in the second block, because you may find yourselves, moving to the first or second week of June before you really have something ready to be published on the website. And we just have to make sure that somewhere in here, we just make sure that the RFP is up there for 3 weeks.
Okay. Thank you. Ellen?
Couple of things. One is just, I think, to answer, or at least as I see it, the question about August. You do have action and a decision. You've got an action around reviewing the responses to the RFPs, and then you have a vote to select the company happening in August. So
that would be moved based on.
would have to be moved, or we'd have to add a meeting or whatever.
Absolutely.
Broad brush. I know this is a proposal. I know steps can change and all that. As you were putting this together, does this roughly compare to in terms of length and scope and steps to the process we did a couple of years ago? Does it feel shortened to you, lengthened to you? What were you, how did you approach?
So the goal was to put this together in such a way that the process wouldn't even start until May 1.
Right.
And so with that in mind, taking it out to what the potential could be, which is up to 12 months. We don't know what the landscape
Which is longer than we did last time.
Yeah, we don't know what the landscape is going to be as it relates to the firms being able to find candidates, and all kinds of things will impact what the timeline is that we have no control over. And so the goal was just to put something together that would realistically show how long it might take in a worst-case scenario, getting up to May 1.
Beyond that, were there any lessons learned that you drew from the last experience that you tried to incorporate in this as changes or modifications, improvements?
So I thought the last process was very, very good. And I've gone through different processes before, and I will say that that firm did an excellent job of taking us through a process. They worked very collaboratively with the board, and ended up doing, I have to say, exactly what the board asked them to do. They were easy to work with from an HR perspective. They didn't dump all of the work on us. They really took ownership of the work. So I would say it was a fantastic experience.
And so I'm hearing that there weren't lessons learned you took, except to maybe try to repeat something like that.
Best practices, absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Any further questions? Andy?
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought the last process worked very well. And I mean, to Keith's discussion on the RFP was actually very quick, because it was just, we've done RFPs for search firms before. We just looked at it. The board approved it. Where the big discussion was on what do you want to see in terms of the requirements for the next president. And that was where the big discussion occurred. So the discussion on the RFP itself was very quick, very minor, because we've done it. We've done it several times. We have templates. There was a subcommittee established that actually did the review of all the submittals, and chose, I think, possibly up to 3, and presented it to the board, and then the board made the decision. So the board didn't, once the RFP was approved, the board didn't get involved until the subcommittee brought back the 3 finalists. So the board didn't have anything really, they could be thinking about, what to do. But once the finalist was made, then the meeting with whoever the search firm is chosen, and they helped us walk through what is it we wanted to see in a new president. And that was very intense.
Ginny?
Yeah, I chaired that subcommittee, and what we did is actually rank. I think we had about 5 or 6 applicants, but we then came in with 3 that we ranked, and the board, we had to justify it with the board, et cetera. The other thing is, when you say, what do we want in terms of characteristics of a CEO, the board wanted a survey done, so that was an add-on to this contract.
Yes, that's right.
I can recall, and that took time, so that delayed it by a month or 2 for them to do a survey of the residents as to what characteristics you want, and if that survey is available, that may happen again, I don't know, but they were a delight to work with, Baker Tilly, really.
Alan?
I agree.
One other question. What you just said, Ginny, raised a question for me. So it makes sense to me that a May 1st start date happens given our fiscal year. Have you given any thought, given that extra steps might want to be added or something that's to be moved from August to September, what of these, and if you haven't, maybe you could think about it some and come back to us, which of these steps could be compressed, moved, combined, or if we adopt something like this, it's like if we add anything, it means we're going to push the end date past May 1st, fiscal year 2025.
No, I think there's enough cushion built in here that we wouldn't have to push the end date past May 1st.
I'm going to start the compression right now because nothing's going to happen on May 1st. The new board doesn't get seated until the second week in May, so that starts the compression. Keith?
I just wanted to clarify. Part of the reason why I was making the comment and feeling the need to make sure I just clear this up is trying to understand what went wrong or what went well in prior situations over multiple years, because we've been working through hiring CEOs for as long as CA has been around, and I think it warrants some conversation to understand in depth what we're looking for, because if the process seemed to go extremely well the last time around, there's something that we're missing in the overall process, and I think it warrants some really deep time to understand what that looks like, what it means, and it may end up needing to be a closed meeting or whatever the case may be, but I think that needs to happen before we jump into a deep conversation about what this RFP looks like and what we need and so on and so forth, so that we get it, we get some alignment in terms of where everybody on the board wants to go.
And the RFP discussion would happen starting in May. So assuming there are no further questions, what I'd request is if you can add a list of board actions, board votes, and if you can line them up with board meetings, I think that'd be really helpful. And then we can move this, take a vote on this at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. It could go on a consent calendar.
I mean, I would agree on the consent, but I think my last comment just sort of went.
So next item on the
consent agenda.
I mean, the last comment wasn't addressed. So,
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Most of this was done in closed meetings because the RFP is a contract, and the selection is all contract, and that's all done in closed session.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not. I don't want to see it as aligned to our open meetings because most of this is not open.
Okay.
This is contract negotiation.
Okay. So if you can just keep that in mind, but it's still, I think it would be helpful to have where what actions require meetings, and just so that we can plan for that. The next item on the agenda is the resolution regarding the Lake Elkhorn stream resolution. Dennis?
The resolution was distributed with the board packet.
It's 15 minutes.
15, thank you.
Sorry. And I would let Brian, you brought this one up, and I put together a resolution consistent with the contract documents that I think achieves the purpose. So I guess I'd like to hear from Brian what his thoughts are.
Yeah, well, of course, I did share with you a little bit of background beforehand, and one of the things everybody knows about this stormwater project is it's extremely complex. But the process to understand it is not, like John Laker said, getting into the minutiae and trying to be the person that makes a decision on what actually happens in the stream and what they're doing. It's the overall process that we've been going through. And one of the things, when I look back at that the video, there was such a short, it was treated like the easements we had this evening. And well, we know really clearly now this easement is not like one of the ones we had this evening. The ones we had this evening were pretty straightforward. We could understand them. There was a number of questions. But for some reason, it was treated the same way. And that's why I felt, and I talked to other people about it, that we need a resolution that puts the board back into the picture so we can understand and be really clear cut of what we're committing to, what the CA is committing to, and making sure that the open space is truly protected. And at the moment, there's so many red flags. I mean, the Army Corps of Engineers waving a red flag, MDE's waving a red flag. They're all over the place, other than all the different people talking about it. We've had a couple of good we had a good presentation from Doug Myers, and he gave us his ideas. But we really need to the board needs to get back into the process, and we need to inject ourselves. So this is where the resolution came from. But the biggest thing is how, when we have a passing a resolution like this, it's also to understand exactly where the board is in the timeline, because as I pointed out in my emails to Dennis, we do know that we're going to have a chance, the CA is going to have a chance to see this before it goes to the two agencies. So I really encourage people to read the two reports from the two agencies, because they're pretty damning, and they're putting so many red flags that we really need to be addressing these things and making sure that we're really protecting open space. So that's my background.
Josh?
So, no, thank you. No, I appreciate that, Brian. So I guess what I want to know, and this is what seems to just keep eluding me. I mean, I've heard testimony, I've heard people come to residents speak out. Where are we in this process? And, my understanding is that there's an easement's been signed. Is there a way could it be stopped if we wanted it to be? Do we have oversight? I mean, I'm going through my notes going back to like 2019, 2020 when we walked Phelps, or when we walked, the Phelps Luck area.
I'm going to let Dennis.
So we are looking, or they are looking to get the funding mechanism approved. We're nowhere close to design documents for this, and we're probably 18 to 24 months out. And keep in mind that when the comments or the responses are sent back to the joint agencies, they have another chance to comment on them as well. So I think it's probably a year before that process is resolved, and then 12, 18 months before pen's on paper kind of, and there's something that you can look at. They're in the funding mechanism phase. We haven't designed it. There's not 66 acres of trees that are going to come down. This is not, this is so early in the process that you don't, at this point in time, there's nothing to really approve.
But Dennis, that wasn't his question. His question is, when does CA have injection points in this?
So CA has approval of the final product. So there are 30% documents, 60% documents, and 90%. But realistically, by the time you get through the 30%, you've decided whether or not you're going to approve it. So if you get a piece of paper that says you're going to take out 66 acres of trees, you're going to say you're nuts. And you're going to say, we're never going to do that. But if it's a reasonable set of documents, you're going to say, move to the next step. So at all those phases, there's a chance for CA to comment. CA has
to decide.
So when does the 30% document, when would CA get that?
Probably, I'd say no sooner than 18 months or 24 months. We are a long way out from that. There's a long comment process. And I know that people are saying that it's going to happen sooner than that, but it is not.
So my counter to that is, and again, because I'm coming from the Long Reach, when I was on the Long Reach Village Board and we walked the I feel like it was during COVID, maybe almost at least 2 years ago now, maybe more, that we walked the property with the contractors and they talked a real good game about what they're going to do. And somehow it got, somehow it was noted that, because we, a lot of the people who are opposed to this project, to the Jackson Pond area specifically, live in Long Reach, and they wanted to know, well, why is it that the Long Reach Village supported this? So it sounds like it was at least, and I was at that meeting where we had the timelines and the big blown up timelines, and it sounded like we were further along than we are. Okay. And I'm just saying that was my perception. I think that was the perception of a lot of our residents.
So if I can also say, there was an inordinate amount of interest from the public, and so the timeline for the questions from the joint, from the Army Corps and MDE there were more questions and more questions. Then they kept changing the way they accounted for credits. And so this thing just kept dragging on and on and on. It was never intended to take this long to get through the funding phase, but it did.
Alan?
2 questions. Did CA, there were some things in that 11-page letter that we all know about that CA was supposed to respond to. Did CA provide responses to MDE?
I read that today. I don't remember seeing. So there were answers to questions about, yes, we all think trees are valuable. I have to look at that again. I don't remember seeing anything that said there was a specific thing that CA was supposed to do.
I thought there was. Okay, if there aren't, that's fine. I'm generally in favor of this, because what I really see this was what you left out, Brian, I think, and I wasn't on the board I don't know, maybe I was when this happened, was the CA board at that time made the decision to recuse themselves from this decision, any decisions about this, and turn it over to the staff and to the Watershed Advisory Committee. And what I see this resolution doing, which is why I'm in favor of it, is repositioning ourselves so we are back in charge of the process, hopefully getting excellent advice and listening to the advice of staff and the Watershed Advisory Committee. That's why we have advisory committees. But this purpose of this is to put us back as part of that decision-making process that Dennis was talking about.
Brian?
Yeah, the piece I would like to try to understand is what is WSSI bringing back at the end of March? What is that document that's coming back to John McCoy to get reviewed? What stage of that is? What is WSSI talking about when they say that they're working towards getting a report in March? What exactly is that, and what timeline do we have to address what they bring back? That's the thing I want to.
Is a point of information a question?
I'll let Dennis answer the question if you want.
The point of information.
Can Dennis respond to the question?
It's to these pieces. What's the purpose of the discussion? Are we discussing the timeline? Or are we discussing the resolution?
The purpose is to discuss the resolution.
Right.
But if Dennis wants to add any additional insight.
So there's not so John McCoy is not going to review and comment and adjust the answers that WSSI provides to the Army Corps and MDE. Those are about the funding mechanism for the project. And if it turns out there isn't enough uplift in there to generate the credits that they need to make the project viable, then it goes away.
But do we get a chance to look at that as well?
As soon as they're submitted.
As soon as they're submitted to us.
As far as my understanding is, they're going to go to us maybe a minute before they go to the joint agencies.
No, well, that's not what they said.
That's my conversation with Scott.
Okay.
Well, Scott, that's not what he said to me, and I've got it written down as well.
Speaking to the resolution, I have a lot of concern about this particular resolution. It is ambiguous, it is arbitrary, it has no criteria associated with it as to what oversight we will provide and what is good and what is bad. It's leaving us open to lawsuits. I think we're in a lot of trouble if we inject ourselves into this with this resolution. There needs to be criteria that says this is the oversight that we shall provide. To just generally say, well, we'll review it at any time, and if we want to say no, we'll just say no.
Let me ask this question.
That's not what we need to be doing.
Wait. Dennis?
So let me make one last comment, which is that there's no reason to jump in the middle of this now and get in the middle of the contract.
I agree.
Let them answer the questions. Maybe they come back and say, you know what, none of it makes any sense.
Yeah.
But right now, you're jumping in the middle of the contract and interfering with it.
To that
Why would you
point.
do that?
To that point, Mr. Chairman, Brian was upset and was saying we've got red flags everywhere. What happened was that the Army Corps raised a question, and they said, prove to us that you should have reach one in this particular project. Show us why it's important, show us how you can do it, show us why it's viable. And if WSSI says this is why, and the Army Corps accepts it, that's what should be going on. We shouldn't be like getting all breathless about it. We should say that's an important question. We await the answer and evaluate the answer when it comes forward.
So let me ask this question. Has this resolution been looked at by any legal staff?
Yes.
And this has been...
I don't support it, but it has been looked at.
And has it been like approved, quote, approved for legality purposes?
So it was looked at by inside counsel, so I would say as written, yes.
Okay. Alan?
Could you explain, I don't read anything in the resolution that says we're jumping in the middle of something. I see this, and tell me how I'm wrong, if I'm wrong, of us simply saying, as this process moves forward, we want the board to have decision power, not the Watershed Advisory Committee who's supposed to advise the board.
Based on what criteria? I mean, so the bill raises a good point. Is it capricious and is it arbitrary? What is the, how is the board going to, the Watershed Committee has expertise.
Right.
John McCoy has expertise. Right. Mostly what we have here, including myself, are
ignorant volunteers.
Or
and we get advice, but it's our job to make the strategic decisions. So I don't see I still don't see us as jumping in the middle. I see us as, when it comes time for one of those decision-making points, let's say the 30%, that rather than us being on the outside watching the staff and the watershed committee make the final decision that we may not agree with, that what we ought to be doing is being in conversation with the staff and the watershed committee, hearing everything, and then as the ones with the fiduciary responsibility for all this, that we should be the ones making the final call.
Dennis?
And so I'm WSSI, I'm getting ready to spend $1.5 million on design. What's the criteria you're going to make your decision on? It's going to be on how you feel about it. It's not going to be
On all the scientific criteria we hear about.
Based on not having the scientific background. There, there are so many things that can be seen, either like use of, I come back to like the use of Roundup. So I think that personally, I wouldn't jump it, and I call it jumping in the middle of it. You don't need to. We haven't gotten the answers back. They may well say, don't do Reach 1.
Right.
And you're still going to have the same rights. 2 days after they provide those answers, you could say, okay, I want to do
But right
this.
now, we can't say that because we've, by board resolution, have turned this over to the Watershed Advisory Committee and the staff.
But you're 20 months away from a design.
So it won't be implemented until 24 months from now. There'd be no need to.
Dick?
But the perception is going to be by someone who's going to get ready to spend $1 million or more than that.
Can you get another voice in here?
I think that what we're looking for is just to be kept informed. I mean, there are a lot of things that are going on, and we want to know where the decision points are. And we certainly want to get the expert advice, because none of us are hydrologists. We've heard a lot of things one way or the other, and we just want to be informed, and we want to be part of the process. And this thing's going to be going on for a couple of years, and we don't want to just wake up one morning and find that contracts have been signed and the bulldozers are pulling in. So, I think that's a reasonable request.
Ginny?
Did I read something in the contract or whatever it was, the resolution, that said it was going to expire in 5 years?
I don't remember reading that. No.
Okay, because I'm thinking we're getting real close to that time. I'll find it. There's something about 5 years.
Bill?
Okay.
Got another point of concern that, say we get a look at this and we now have oversight, and Dick thinks oversight means keep informed, and Alan has another definition of what oversight is. And for some reason, this board, or actually a future board, gets cold feet and just says, based on our resolution that says we have oversight, we're going to say no to this, and somebody's house falls into that creek. They're going to sue us because we had the ability to prevent that, and then we decided not to do it, and we damn well better had a good reason to not do it beyond what we've seen so far, right? I mean, there's some real legal issues headed our way if we're looking at this resolution to lean on.
So
this needs a lot of improvement.
So you could, I get what you're saying, but you could make the same argument about easements. I mean, none of us are public works experts, and yet we're voting on 3 easements in 2 weeks. And those easements could have, or whether we approve them or don't approve them, could have significant impacts on people's homes, depending on where they're located and the land use around them. So we're directors on a board. We're tasked with making strategic decisions. That's our role as directors on a board. And so the way I see it is this is sort of along those lines as being directors on the board. No, being a director doesn't mean we have to be experts in everything. No one's an expert in everything. But the key thing is knowing where to get the information to help make intelligent decisions. Andy?
No, there's a big difference between the easements we did tonight and this. We've signed a contract. We have legal obligations. Okay, this is not like the easements we're talking about today because we haven't executed them. We've executed this easement. The easement has been given. We've signed a contract. We need, as a board, to follow the contract. And if we want to make a decision, we have got to use what's in the contract to make that decision.
So Andy, I'm going to point out that. I'm going to point out one line for you. It says in compliance with the contract.
Because your argument was, well, we're not experts for easements, and the answer is has nothing to do with it. This is a totally different situation because we're not talking about an easement. We're talking about a contract. The second thing is I agree that this is way too vague. The point at which, if you're going to make any decision, should be at the 30% design. And that, and only that, is when the board, should, if it wants to get involved, should only get involved at that point. Everything else is administrative. It's the 30% design where you're going to say yay or nay.
Josh?
So this is where I think a lot of people are getting confused. And because some people are saying, okay, easement signed, there's a contract, we have to honor it. And then some people are saying, oh no, we're 24 months away, we have milestones A, B, and C that still have to be met. I think we have to reconcile that. And I agree with the spirit and intent of what Brian has proposed here, but I do think we need to flesh this out a little bit more. But I think we need to reconcile where we are between easement and these next 3 milestones.
So what are you proposing to be changed?
I'd like to see a little more meat on the bones here with this proposal, but I think we're all in agreement. It sounds like we need to have some oversight over this. And it does sound like, to the extent there's a contract, and that's what I think we just don't know. I don't know. I don't know what's in that contract right now.
Alan?
I think we're making this way too complicated. I think we'll obviously have to follow the contract. That's already a contract. Whatever the contract is, and whatever the terms are, we have to follow.
Because of the resolution.
The only question that I see this resolution doing is taking back our board's prerogatives that the board gave a year or two ago to the Watershed Advisory Committee, and is sort of taking back our role as decision maker, restoring their role as advisory, and it would only take effect when there were times to make decisions. And clearly, if there's a contract, we can't just willy-nilly say, no, we're backing out of the contract. That we can't do. But I hear that in the contract, there are some decision points that we will have some, and maybe the first one is the 30% drawings. Fine, then that's the first time that this would come into play.
So we're out of time for this, but if you can take 30 seconds.
Yes, one quick thought. Absent this resolution, this board still has plenty of power and authority to move within the bounds of this topic. We could have John McCoy come in and say, what do you think of the 30%? And give him our opinion of what we thought of the 30% design. We could do the same thing with the entire Watershed Advisory Committee. There's plenty of ways that we could advocate and work towards a solution that we feel is in the best interest of Columbia. We do not need this resolution.
Brian?
Yeah,
30 seconds.
Just probably to wrap it up. I just want to say one thing. I'm not an expert on stormwater things, but what I feel that I am is be able to facilitate an understanding of what the project is, not to the minutiae. I was on the original board that developed the Columbia Watershed Plan. I was then the co-chair of the Watershed Advisory Committee, then the Watershed Advisory.
Do you have anything pertinent on the resolution? We're pretty much out of time, please.
Okay, I'm just saying that if there's suggestions for the resolution, then we should get those suggestions all together and incorporate those in there if you want to make it clearer.
So right now,
just a quick question. It's just
10 seconds.
We've been talking about an easement and now a contract.
The easement's been approved.
What exactly is there out there? And has the easement been filed? The
easement was approved in 2019, wasn't it?
Yeah. But is it filed with the land records? Or?
Sure it is. Sure, it's 4 years old.
I was told by someone that it wasn't.
Well, and
I'm just curious to know where we stand.
I'll verify that.
Okay. The last item on our agenda is the discussion on the CA board operations. I'll actually introduce this one. So right now, our current drumbeat is basically we have 2 meetings a month. The first meeting is a work session, which is what we're in now, and the second meeting is an actual meeting where we vote. In the past, this actually wasn't the case. In fact, if you look at your packet in the past, we actually had a committee structure, and if you go back historically, the committees, we basically had 3 committees. One was a oversight committee, which basically include all the auditing, all the risk management, policy review, that type of thing. We had a strategic committee, which basically looked at strategy, budgeting, that type of thing. We also had a an external relations committee, which looked at branding, advertising. I think it also worked with legislatures and community development. And then the chairs of those committees would actually be part of the board operations committee with the chair and the vice chair of the entire board. And that committee was a not a rotational committee like we have today, but that was more of a static committee where they would set the agendas. And I think there were some other responsibilities for that committee in addition to setting the agendas. So my point is, as chair, one thing that I recognize is that there's been what I'll call organized chaos when it comes to taking an idea and getting it to a vote. And what I'd like to see is to have a process where we have an idea, the idea gets mulled through a committee. The committee works on it, hashes it out. It's a known committee. It's a standing committee. Once the members of that committee approve something, then that can go to the board operations to schedule it for a full vote. And the goal here is to, streamline operations so that we know how an idea becomes policy. And we have a very distinct chain of events versus someone just bringing something up at a work session. Let's go amend the agenda and let's bring up this resolution. Let's go pass it. Where we have a very consistent stream of events to do that. So I'm going to preface this all by saying we're not going to vote on this in 2 weeks. This is going to be something that this board's going to have to mull over this month and next month. But my goal for this session is to actually establish whether or not we as a board like the idea of moving to a committee structure. And then over the next meetings, we decide, okay, if we like the idea of moving to a committee structure, how many committees, what types of committees would we want sort of in the broader sense? And then the third meeting would be, okay, once we establish the committees, would be to have a more detailed set of roles and responsibilities for each of those committees. So with that, I will open it up to discussion. I'll start with Lynn.
You said that the CA board had a committee process before. Does your process differ a lot from what was here before, and how did what was here before work?
Could I respond to that?
Why did it stop?
I could tell you that.
So, Alan, you want to respond to that?
So just to be clear, under that structure, the board met once a month, the committees met once a month. And the committees, at least when I first came on the board, met on separate nights. And what ended up happening was, because I think of trust issues, actually started before I was on the board, because of trust issues among the board members started coming to everybody else's committee meeting.
Yep. Yes.
And so that just, so that instead of being two meetings a month, once for your committee and once for the whole board, ended up being 3, 4, 5 meetings that we go to a month.
So I do have a solution to that problem. Wait, I do have a solution to that.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah, can I interject?
No, because she asked about the history and why it didn't work.
No, it sounds
So
like a clown show.
the fix for that was, let's have the committees all meet right here in this room, all at the same time. And so the chair would open up the whole meeting, and then I, as chair of the strategic whatever it was called committee, would say, I now call the meeting of the strategic whatever committee meeting to order, and there'd be 2 other voting members of that committee. But all the other board members would talk too. So it was basically a committee of the whole with only 3 members voting.
It's insane.
That was insane in and of itself.
Insane or embarrassing?
Both.
Both.
And so that got dropped in favor of let's have this second meeting that would be a work session. So that's when we would do our discussing, and we would do our voting during the meeting. And those distinctions have gotten blurred, and that's led us to whatever show that we have now.
So there's a solution to everyone attending all the meetings. You just have both meetings occur at the same time in 2 very different locations.
Well,
so you can have one meeting in one village
the board, there was
center
not enough trust that the board to agree to that.
and another meeting in a different village location.
So you could have a discussion on stream restoration, or you could have a discussion on ethics policy, but not both. And you only get to choose one.
Well, no,
That's not going to sit well with most people.
No, you'd be
So
assigned to a committee.
Yeah, the other point I would like to say is this would have been a great, sterling discussion last year. With 3 meetings left in this year, I think the best we can do with this, Eric, is to say, hey, next board, you really need to clean up board structure and pay attention to it and come up with a good plan. With 3 meetings left, I don't think that we should, respectfully, because I understand where you're coming from, and I think it's a good idea, but we should just let this go to the next board, honestly.
Yeah, if you let go of the next board, you're going to have the same problem again. Bill? Or Brian, sorry. It's, I switched it. Brian.
Well done. Yeah, as I went
that's
down,
gonna
you went
happen.
idea, Eric, you went idea committee, board operations committee, full vote. Or what about the work session and then the monthly meeting? I couldn't understand quite what's the full vote for with that's the list you went into.
Oh, so we're actually, so basically, it'd be 3 discussions, and then the whole thing would be wrapped up into a vote at the end of April. And the idea basically is.
No, I'm talking about your actual.
The steps to make the bill.
Those
you want
steps.
to have in place. It's
yeah.
idea to committee, from committee to board operations.
For scheduling.
For scheduling.
For
not-
scheduling.
You said vote.
For scheduling.
Scheduling. Oh.
And then the board operations, which is what we do, which is what the board of operations does today, is
Right, I get
the
that.
schedule, and
But
then that
I
goes
heard
onto
vote, you see,
that gets onto the agenda.
Okay, got it.
So,
Although at board ops, you may vote not to put that forward onto an agenda, so
Yes, that's
it
right.
could
That's
die.
sort of vote.
and then the chair could vote to amend the agenda during meetings, which we've got a lot of experience in doing also.
Yes.
What I'm looking for.
So any further discussion on committees? Keith?
So the only piece that I the only piece that I was wondering about in terms of some of the materials that were sent to me is, and I think Andy, you had sent something out following also, is the board operations committee is also charged with governance, and that includes training, structure, all of these pieces.
So that was historically, so if you go back when we actually had this committee structure, so what's in the packet is more of a historical document. So if you go back, I think 10, 15 years or so, that's what the Board Operations Committee did. Right now, because the Board of Operations Committee is a rotating committee, so the members change every quarter, is really only tasked with setting the agenda. Because you can't really, the Board Operations Committee can't really do much else because it rotates.
But
Andy, did you have another thing?
The board approved a governance document, which all of you have gotten a copy of, should have all had a copy. And in it, it lays out the charters, the duties for the different committees. And if the BOC chooses simply to do agendas, yes, it can, but there are other things that the board has given the BOC authority to do if the BOC wishes to do it. That hasn't changed. That policy is still in effect.
It
was approved in March of 2017.
Yeah, it's just not workable when you have a committee that's changing every 3 months. I mean, it's.
Yes, I understand it may not be workable.
There's a pragmatic issue.
But the problem, but what you're saying is they can't do it, and my thought is, no, they have the authority to do it if they choose to do it. Because it's all laid out and the board approved, the responsibilities for each of those committees. If the committee chooses not to execute its authority for whatever reason,
Just because the committee has the authority to do it doesn't mean they can pragmatically and practically execute it.
Is it in policy that it has to rotate?
Right now, the policy, I believe right now there is a policy that the committee rotates. So the chair and vice chair are fixed, and the 2 other positions rotate amongst the 8 members. So every quarter, a different pair. So one thing you could do is say you had 2 committees, 5 and 5, chair and vice chair on either committee. You could actually rotate it by having 1 member from committee A and 1 member from committee B on the BOC, and you could still preserve the same rotational structure, but making sure you get voices from both committees.
So, I gave it to Andy, and I just wanted to take it back if I can, just to
Sure.
finish that out. The piece that I'm looking at, regardless of the structure and the dynamics and the policy, is I believe that rather than the board deliberating on on structures and committees and practice and so on and so forth, typically there's another subcommittee, and however we need to vote to make that happen, that decides on governance pieces and gets that to the board for a final vote. So the same way we're looking at all these other committees, you've got your glasses on the floor you're going to step on, Dick.
Thank you.
And
that's what I guess at the simplicity of it, we can debate what's in and what's out and so on and so forth. But at the core, we still have a charter that says it can do these things. And it seems to me that really what we need to do is establish a governance committee that can do it.
And that's eventually where I want to get to. So what I want to do is at least if we can agree on that we want committees, and then the next step, which could be in 2 weeks, would be discuss, okay, what should those committees be doing? What should those subcommittees be doing? And that certainly is one key thing that is important for a committee to do. Alan?
Yeah. I want us to operate more effectively, and I guess I'm still up in the air about whether a committee structure would help that. I'm not against it. I'm still thinking about it. Andy, as our resident historian, in 2017, were we still under the committee structure, or were we in our...
We were under the committee structure.
That's what I thought. So I would say that that's the big thing that's changed. Yes, the BOC had that authority when it was a standing committee, when it made sense to. Now that that's changed, I think it makes sense to relook at that, because it's not... What part I disagree with what you said is I don't think it's about whether the committee wants to do it. It's about whether the board has tasked the committee to do it and wants to continue to task the committee to do it, or if we think that that's not the best structure.
Yeah, what I would say is if you look at the document, you will discover that for the 3 committees that remain, the board wiped out all the other committees. You only left 3 committees, the risk management, audit, and BOC.
But was that prior to 2017?
Those are actually new committees. They got carved out of the oversight committee.
No.
Because the oversight committee actually had...
No.
It's actually in here. The oversight committee...
Management's existed since 1986.
Yeah.
Because the oversight committee actually had the auditing in it. So that role got sort of carved out.
2017, we still kept BOC and audit and risk management, and in that document is the authority that each of those committees has, given to it by the board.
And that it would be a rotating membership of BOC. So we've tried it, and maybe it's not working. Thank you.
Any further comments from Ginny?
Yeah, I think what you're asking us to do tonight is to decide whether we want to continue to function as we've been functioning, or are we interested in committees? I think that's really the only issue that you want decided. I, for one, have been on many, many boards, and I could not believe that this board did not have either standing committees that deal with certain issues or areas of jurisdiction, or a task force that's created to deal with a specific issue. Let's take ethics if we want. And that they can intensively work on that, and then they present it to the full board. I could not believe we've been functioning the way we've been functioning. It's not the best way to go. You need a group that will spend time working on something, and not just the board members. They can hear from other experts, they can hear from residents, etc. But to function like this is pathetic. So I'm all for subcommittees, and I'd like to see us move quickly. I don't think you pass this problem on to another board. If you know it's a problem, let's start dealing with it, and I don't see it in the BOC. I see specific committees or task forces, one or the other. Thank you.
Are we going to call them subcommittees, or are these task forces?
The committees. They'd be standing committees.
They'd be standing committees.
Yes.
As opposed to a task force that would take on a particular issue.
Yeah, they're standing committees. I mean, the board can create task force whenever it wants to.
Yeah,
I
know.
The standing committee could create a task force. Task force
that is something
specific, one issue.
Have had we've done it a few times, and I think we've gotten some pretty good results. We've had task forces.
But the task force have also run into some other issues with regards to things like meeting announcements and minutes and and whether they come and the permanence of them.
This maybe we need a legal explanation of
Let's
this.
stop that conversation.
But we can stop that.
So is that what you're asking, is how many of us
Yeah.
want to explore this more?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. So generally speaking, how many people like the idea of committees?
Like the idea of committees, like the idea of exploring committees.
Explore the idea of committees.
Exploring.
So we don't have committees today?
Well,
Talking about this
having a more formalized standing committee structure where you can take, where an idea goes to a committee, the committee, like, take the stream restoration, like, instead of having 10 people try to work it out, you'd have a committee that would try to formulate the words, work with the CA staff experts to try to actually get something in the right state of development, so then it could go to a full board for a vote.
When you do raise just one other historical thing I believe is accurate, was each of those three committees had a staff liaison who also met.
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility.
That's a good point.
So the only reason I was looking at board governance is because we will potentially end up in the same place that history has taken us because of the trust issues. And based upon what we've experienced, what the folks that we represent have communicated with us, that's the reason why I was suggesting a board governance, because that would deal with our ethics, it would deal with our process.
Well, that'd be a committee.
We could, but we already have one, is what I'm saying.
We do?
Mr. Chairman?
We don't.
Just one final thought. Could we spend some time and resources on resolving trust issues rather than creating intricate committee structures? And then maybe we would just have a better board experience?
I think maybe having committees might actually help the trust issues.
Yeah. So I was asking, what do you all think? Do you want to continue to work on?
Not with 3 meetings left. No. Let the next board do it.
Excuse me, other people have a right to say yes or no. I'm saying yes.
I'll actually go around. Josh?
I got nothing.
You got nothing? So you're ambivalent.
No, we're
not voting, but
we're not voting. We're saying, are you interested in committees?
Is that something you'd be interested
in?
in?
I mean, perfectly appropriate response.
I mean, yeah, I'm the new guy.
Ambivalent is fine.
Yeah, I'm ambivalent right
Brian, I'm just going
I'd like the idea.
Keith, do you like the idea?
I'm in the new guy vote.
You're in the new guy vote? Yep. Ambivalent. Do you like the idea? Oh, sorry. Oh, Dennis, do you like the idea?
I don't get a vote, do I?
You don't get a vote. We're not voting.
We're not voting. You get
I'm not opposed to exploring stuff, so yeah.
Okay.
I'm also not opposed to exploring stuff, and I think it could help the trust, and I'm not opposed to working directly on trust issues.
Okay. Jenny?
Yes. Exploring it, yeah.
Dick?
I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
I think we'd be better served if we wrote a Dear FY23 board letter and asked them to.
We are the FY23 board.
Andy?
No, I'll say probably no.
Okay. It sounds like there's enough support to continue exploring this.
You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4.
We're not voting, but it sounds like it's worth trying to explore it for keep it on the discussion for next meeting. I mean, it's already on the.
It was not a vote.
It's not a vote. It's not a vote, but there seems to be enough support to continue the discussion. It's already scheduled to be discussed in the next meeting per the BSC. And given that.
Well, but it would be nice to have for the next meeting, and I am not volunteering, it would be nice to have for the next meeting to discuss, not just an amorphous topic, but some further thoughts.
I think the idea is at the next meeting, we can try to work together to try to generate a sample structure, what a structure could look like that we could discuss and debate.
What I'm saying is, it would help me, and I can't require it, to have somebody create a structure that we could look at.
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah, that's the next step. Exactly.
Okay, sounds
Okay.
good.
Any further discussion on this? That brings us to questions only. Any questions?
Why is there air?
What?
Talking with your grandson.
Okay, proposed new topics. Any proposed new topics?
I did have one thing. At some point, and I know, like I said, I'm brand new, so I wanted to be able to discuss a specific Long Reach problem with regard to the Stonehouse renovation. Long Reach lost a lot of tenants due to the Stonehouse, and then the way the time frame kind of was a bit of a moving target, and the way the timeline for renovation slipped, and they lost a lot of tenants as a result, and wanted to be able to. When I spoke to the village, they wanted to be able to have a discussion about whether or not we want to allow them to keep their reserve funds for the year versus having to return it. So I'd like to maybe have that discussion at some point soon.
Okay. Dennis or Susan, do you have any insights into those funds?
We can talk about it internally. I don't have a thought on it right now.
Okay.
You considered it.
Okay.
I
Jane?
just have a quick one, a discussion of when the advisory committee should be reporting, because they're asking that question. They reported all in May. Is that what you want again? Because they have to start writing their report, or do you have some plan for how you want maybe some of them in May, some in June, whatever, but we need to really, let them know.
So I think that's actually an agenda item for the end of April, discussing the role of the advisory committees.
The problem is, if we want it again in May, they are writing their reports, drafts, and having it approved by their committee in April, et cetera. So they need communication as to what you really intend.
Yeah.
That's it.
Which committee?
All of them.
Just a friendly amendment to the discussion of the committees. I know of at least 2 committees that would seek a name change. Can we put that as part of our discussion?
Yeah.
I think one of them requires a legal issue.
They all require changing the charters, but that we could start that.
So if they haven't changed their charters, wouldn't they have to first change their charters and have the charters approved?
The senior one has changed its charter. I believe it's with legal, Leslie, and et cetera. The other one, you're,
Millennial?
well, you said they had to vote first for a change, because when I proposed it, you said no. You wanted the committee to vote. Did they vote?
Well, we had a meeting.
Did they vote?
I don't know if we have minutes on that. I'll have to check.
Okay, because your point when I raised it a year ago almost is you can't vote on it until the committee, not just the vice chair of the committee saying what he wanted.
Yeah, you have to have a resolution.
The whole committee had to do it, and you're the liaison.
Yeah, I mean, the committee should send a letter to the board.
Right.
Which we haven't
I'll
received.
go back around with the staff liaison. We'll coordinate.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
because that's why we pulled it.
Dennis?
I'd like to recommend that we push back that committee review to June, because by the time you seat the board at the first meeting in May, and then you do some orientation at the second meeting, it doesn't leave a lot of time to front load the committee discussion. And so I think it's more important to do the orientation than to do the committees in May.
Also heard there could be some serious time to spend discussing the new CEO search process.
And actually, that's, so the May agendas are not set yet, so that's something that I believe the CEO sets, the May agenda, so.
We were tossing that around, and it occurred to us that orientation, a major orientation.
But yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Okay.
Any further?
Where does evolution of our education and onboarding and all of those pieces happen for the discussion of what we need to do? Not just that meeting, but what that whole process looks like, what training, what engagement we're going to be having. It seems like we've been discussing a lot that it needs to happen, but I don't know where that fits.
Yeah, I think that the onboarding needs to happen the first thing in May when we get a new board.
I don't mean actually it happening, but the structure of what that needs to look like and how it needs to evolve.
That's something that the board definitely needs to take up.
Well, and to me, I agree with it. And that, to me, the whole question of this board operations item we just went through is more than just committee structure. It's looking at things like that. I think we need to look at all those kinds of processes.
Yes. And then that goes back to your concern about having a governance committee, because a governance committee could be looking at, okay, what are the necessary training, necessary onboardings that board members need to go through and need to understand. Any further proposed new topics? Chair remarks. It's 10:45, so that's my chair remarks. Can I go?
I have one last comment on that. If you're going to put together an onboarding session, an information session, we really need a board handbook. And Andy has prepared one that I think should be discussed.
Be part of the board operation.
You need to have some kind of a manual
Yeah,
that will tell people what they need to know.
yeah, agreed.
And so I'd like to put Andy's proposal on the agenda.
Well, I think the issue is whether staff prepares the onboard and training or whether the board does it.
Andy has already written something. Why don't we review it,
Well-
see if we agree with it or not?
Yeah.
I think that should be on the definitely the topics list.
We're going to have to meet 4 times in April
Yeah, we're gonna have some extra meetings.
to get all the things that want to be on the topic list.
To listen to the
Well, our topics list goes on for a while.
Bring sleeping bags, one or the other.
So that handbook was on the topics log and was removed at BOC, right?
Well, we didn't remove it from the topics list, so it just didn't add it to the agenda, the BOC.
It was scratched from the agenda.
Okay.
Anyway, any chair remarks? It's late, so I will go to. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Can I get a second? Take seconds. Any objections? Meeting's adjourned.